tried to be enough for her, not in a fake way, not in a changing who I am way, but in a way where I genuinely believed that if I showed up right, it would be enough. So I gave more time, more attention, more patience. Whenever something felt off, I didn't pull away, I leaned in, because in my head, if something is slipping, you don't let go. You hold it tighter, you fix it, you show up better. But what I didn't understand at the time was this: you can't be enough for someone who's already unsure about you. The more I tried to be enough for her, the more I started losing myself in the process. Because every time something felt off, I didn't question her. I questioned me. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. Maybe I wasn't saying the right things. Maybe I needed to be more understanding, more patient, more whatever she needed, so I adjusted. Not all at once, just little changes, trying to meet her where she was, even when she wasn't meeting me back. And that's how it starts. You don't notice it right away, but slowly you go from being yourself to being who you think they'll stay for. And the crazy part is, the more I gave, the less it seemed to matter, because being enough isn't something you prove through effort. It's something someone decides, and I was trying to earn something that isn't earned like that. I thought if I stayed consistent enough, if I showed her I wasn't going anywhere, if I made it clear how much I cared, she would eventually see me the way I wanted her to, but she didn't. And that's when it started hitting me. This wasn't about effort anymore, because if someone already sees you as not quite enough, no amount of extra effort fixes that. It just exhausts you. You keep giving, keep adjusting, keep trying to close a gap that only exists in their perception, and that gap never closes, because it was never about what you lacked. It was about how they saw you, and that's something you can't control. There were moments where I thought I was finally getting there, moments where she seemed more present, more engaged, more like everything I had been trying to build toward, and those moments kept me going, because they felt like progress, like proof that everything I was doing was starting to work. But looking back now, those weren't breakthroughs. They were just temporary highs in something that was still unstable. And every time it dropped again, I went right back into trying to fix it, trying to understand it, trying to be better, because I didn't want to accept something simple, that I could be everything I was supposed to be and still not be enough for her. That's a hard truth to sit with, because it forces you to stop trying and just see things for what they are. For a while, I took it personally. I thought it meant something about me, like I was missing something, like I needed to improve something to be chosen. But now I understand something clearly. You're not supposed to feel like you're constantly proving your worth to someone who truly values you. That feeling, that constant need to be more, that's not love. That's insecurity being fed by inconsistency. Because the right person doesn't make you feel like you're almost enough. They don't keep you in a space where you're trying to level up just to be chosen. They see you clearly and they decide, without you having to convince them, without you having to overextend yourself, without you having to question where you stand. And once I understood that, everything changed, because now I wasn't looking at myself like I needed to improve to be chosen. I was looking at the situation for what it really was: misalignment, not lack, not failure, just two people who weren't seeing each other the same way, and no amount of effort fixes that. So yeah, I tried to be enough for her, and for a while I thought I wasn't, but now I see it differently. I was already enough, just not for her, and that's okay, because the goal was never to become enough for the wrong person. It's to be recognized by the right one, the one who doesn't need convincing, the one who doesn't need you to prove your value, the one who sees you and chooses you as you are. So I'm not trying to be more anymore, I'm just being real and letting the right person recognize it. It's always at night when everything hits at once. Your room gets quiet, your phone is dry, everyone's asleep, and suddenly your mind keeps replaying everything. You try to forget the laughs, the old texts, the what-ifs. You start missing people you swore you moved on from. You start feeling things you buried a long time ago. And it's not even about wanting them back. It's about wishing things just ended differently. Wishing you said more, or nothing at all. You ever lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling like the past is louder than the present? It's like Aaron from Attack on Titan, haunted by the weight of what's already gone, but still pretending to move forward like it doesn't hurt. And the worst part? You can't talk to anyone about it because it's 2 a.m., and no one would get it anyway. But let me remind you this. Those memories, they're just echoes. They feel loud now, but they don't define you. You lived through them and you're still here, and yeah, it hurts, but that means you cared. And caring, that's not weakness. That's proof you're human. So breathe. You won't feel like this forever. It always gets heavier at night. Not during the day when there's noise, distractions, people moving around. It's when everything finally shuts off. When your room is still, your phone hasn't buzzed in hours, and the world feels like it forgot about you. That's when your thoughts stop waiting their turn. Your mind starts pulling things out of storage you didn't ask for. Old conversations, screenshots you never deleted, moments you thought you were over until they show up uninvited. Tell yourself you've moved on, and maybe you have. Moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It just means learning how to live with what still lingers. You don't even want them back. That's the confusing part. You just wish things had ended cleaner, wish you explained yourself better, or maybe wish you stayed quiet instead of saying too much. You replay scenarios that can't be fixed, trying to rewrite endings that are already locked in. You lie there staring at the ceiling, feeling like the past is louder than the life you're living right now, like everything that mattered before is screaming for attention, while the present barely whispers. You wonder why it still affects you, why it still sneaks up on you when you thought you were stronger than this. And the worst part is the timing. Too late to text anyone, too late to explain how heavy your chest feels, too late to ask for reassurance without feeling dramatic. So you just sit with it, alone, letting it hit you in waves. It's like carrying something invisible all day, and at night you finally feel the full weight of it. You act fine, you move forward, but inside, there's still grief for versions of life that never happened, for people who changed, for moments that ended before you were ready. But here's what matters. Those memories aren't commands, they're echoes. They sound loud in the quiet, but they don't control where you're going. They don't erase the fact that you survived them. They don't cancel the future you haven't lived yet. If it hurts, that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you felt deeply. It means something mattered to you. And caring isn't something to be ashamed of, even when it leaves scars. So breathe. Let the night pass. You won't always feel like this, and one day the quiet won't feel so heavy anymore. There's a certain kind of loneliness that only shows up at night. Not the kind that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from remembering when you weren't, when someone used to be a constant, a voice you could reach for without thinking, a presence that made the quiet feel safe instead of heavy. At night, you realize how much space they used to fill. Now that space just exists, unoccupied, untouched. You don't want to fill it with anyone else because it doesn't feel right yet. So you sit with it, even though it aches. Your mind starts drifting into the what-ifs. What if I had said things differently? What if I stayed quiet instead of reacting? What if I left sooner? What if I tried harder? You run through 100 alternate endings, knowing none of them change reality, but somehow your brain keeps trying anyway. That's the trap of nighttime thinking. It convinces you that if you replay the past enough times, you'll finally find peace in it. But peace doesn't live there anymore. All that's left are lessons and memories, and sometimes even those feel too loud. You start feeling behind in life, like everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck unpacking things you never asked to carry. You scroll through your phone, watching people live, love, laugh, post highlights, and you wonder why your heart feels so heavy when everyone else seems fine. But comparison at night is dangerous. You're seeing everyone else's daylight while you're stuck in your midnight, and that will always feel unfair. What you don't see is how many people are lying awake just like you, staring at ceilings, replaying moments, trying to make peace with things that didn't turn out the way they hoped. You're not broken for feeling this way. You're processing, you're grieving, you're letting go in real time, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. And slowly, very slowly, these nights will change. They won't disappear, but they won't crush you either. The memories will still come, but they won't steal your breath. The quiet will start feeling less empty and more calm. You won't always feel haunted by the past. One night, you'll realize you're thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday. Eventually, you start noticing that the nights don't hit the same every time. Some nights still hurt, yeah, but other nights feel quieter in a different way. Not empty, just still. And that's when you realize something is slowly shifting inside you, even if you didn't notice it during the day. You begin to understand that missing someone doesn't always mean you want them back. Sometimes it just means they were part of a chapter that mattered. a chapter that shaped you. And endings like that don't disappear quietly. They linger, they echo, not because you're stuck, but because you lived it fully. At night, you start reflecting less on them and more on yourself, on how much you've changed since then, on how certain things you tolerated before you'd never accept now, on how some versions of you had to break so newer ones could exist. And that realization is bittersweet, because growth often comes wrapped in loss. You realize that the pain isn't pointless. It taught you boundaries. It taught you what effort looks like when it's real. It taught you how to spot the difference between attention and intention. Those lessons didn't come cheap. They weren't wasted either. There are still moments when the past creeps in unannounced, and a random thought tightens your chest for a second. But now, you don't spiral the way you used to. You acknowledge it, let it pass. You don't punish yourself for remembering. You don't shame yourself for caring, and that's progress. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? You start asking, what did this teach me? And that question changes everything. The nights don't feel like battles anymore. They feel like checkpoints. Moments where you check in with yourself, where you realize how far you've come even if you still have a long way to go. And one day, you'll lie in bed and realize your thoughts aren't pulling you backward anymore. They're just passing through. And for the first time in a while, the quiet won't feel heavy. It'll feel earned. There's a point where the night stops feeling like an enemy and starts feeling like a mirror. Not one that judges you, but one that shows you who you've become. You're not the same person you were back then. You don't react the same. You don't attach the same. You don't give pieces of yourself away as easily. And while part of you misses that softness, another part of you is grateful you learned how to protect it. You start realizing that healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up all at once. It happens in quiet moments like this, when you choose not to spiral, when you choose not to reach out, when you choose to sit with your feelings instead of running from them. Those small decisions stack up, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. Some nights you'll still feel that ache, that sense of loss, but it won't feel like panic anymore. It'll feel like a reminder that you loved something real, reminder that you're capable of depth. And instead of breaking you, that thought will start to ground you. You'll also start noticing how much space you've created. Space in your mind, space in your heart, space in your life. At first, that space felt terrifying, like something was missing. Now it starts to feel like potential, like room for something healthier, something calmer, something that doesn't require you to lose sleep just to feel secure. You begin trusting yourself again, trusting that you can handle whatever comes next, trusting that even if something ends, you won't fall apart the way you once did. You've already proven that to yourself night after night just by getting through. And that's the part people don't see. They don't see the growth that happens in silence. They don't see the strength it takes to sit with your thoughts and still choose to move forward. But you know, and that's enough. The night won't always feel like this. One day it'll just be night. No wait, no replay, just rest. At some point, you stop fighting the memories when they show up. You don't chase them, but you don't shove them away either. You let them pass through like background noise instead of letting them take over the whole room. That's when you realize you're not healing by force anymore. You're healing by acceptance. You accept that some nights will still feel heavier than others, that certain dates, certain places, certain songs will still stir something inside you. But now, those moments don't define your entire mood. Don't steal the whole night. They're just moments, and moments pass. You also start understanding that the past isn't trying to pull you back, just reminding you that you lived, that you felt something real, that you weren't numb, and there's something powerful about that, because numbness is easy. Feeling is brave. You stop asking yourself if you'll ever fully move on. That question slowly loses importance. Instead, you start asking, am I okay right now? And most nights, the answer becomes yes. Not perfect, not amazing, but okay. And that's enough. You notice how your thoughts begin drifting toward things ahead of you. Plans, goals, small things you're looking forward to. First, it surprises you. Like, when did my mind start doing this? But that's how healing works. It sneaks up on you, one quiet night at a time. And even when the past visits, it doesn't feel like a threat anymore. It feels like a chapter you've already read. One that mattered. One that changed you. Not one you need to reread every night to understand. You're learning how to rest without carrying everything with you, how to sleep without replaying endings, how to let the present exist without being overshadowed by what's already gone, and that's progress. Whether you recognize it yet or not, there's a quiet confidence that starts forming in you after all those nights. It doesn't come from feeling happy all the time. It comes from knowing you can sit with discomfort and still be okay. You've already faced the worst parts of your thoughts in the dark. and they didn't destroy you. That realization changes how you move through life. You stop being afraid of the quiet. Silence doesn't feel like abandonment anymore. It feels neutral, sometimes even comforting. You don't need constant noise or validation to feel grounded. You've learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. And that's something a lot of people never figure out. You also become more honest with yourself about what you want, about what you won't tolerate again, about the kind of connections you deserve. The nights taught you that chasing what's gone only keeps you stuck, and protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. And when you think back on the people you missed, the pain isn't as sharp. There's still tenderness there, but it's softer now, less like a wound and more like a scar. Proof that something happened, but also proof that it healed. You start trusting that life doesn't end with one loss, that the world doesn't stop because something did. You realize that endings don't erase everything that came before them, and they don't block everything that comes after. They just redirect you, and one night, without any dramatic moment, you'll notice something small but important. You're tired in a normal way, not emotionally drained, not overwhelmed, just ready to rest. And as you close your eyes, you won't feel haunted, you'll feel present, and then one night, it doesn't hurt anymore. Not in the way it used to. You still remember, but the memories don't grip your chest. They don't steal your breath. They don't pull you backwards. They just exist quietly like old photographs stored away instead of wounds left open. You realize you didn't get over it all at once. You outgrew it slowly, night by night, thought by thought. You kept living even when it was hard. You kept choosing yourself even when part of you wanted to stay stuck in what was familiar. And without noticing, you built something stronger than closure. You built resilience. The nights that once felt unbearable became lessons. They taught you how to sit with yourself, how to listen instead of run, how to accept endings without needing them to make sense. And because of that, you're not afraid of feeling anymore. You're not afraid of caring. You're not afraid of loving again when the time is right. You understand now that pain doesn't mean you failed. It means you were present. It means you opened your heart in a world that doesn't always know how to hold it gently, and that's not something to regret, that's something to respect. Past no longer defines you, it informs you, it shaped you, but it doesn't own you. You carry it with wisdom now, not weight. And the quiet you once feared, it's become peace. So if tonight feels heavy, remember this. You won't always feel like this. You are moving forward even when it doesn't feel obvious. And one day, you'll look back at these nights and realize they didn't break you. They built you. Leave her alone, bro. Not because you stopped caring, but because you cared longer than you should have. You gave her chances when she gave you confusion. You gave her patience when she gave you mixed signals. You showed up consistently while she showed up only when it was convenient. And the hardest part to admit isn't that she didn't choose you, it's that you kept choosing her even when she made it clear you weren't a priority. You stayed solid, you stayed available, you stayed hoping one day she'd wake up and finally see you the way you saw her, hoping one day she'd match your effort, your energy, your care, but she didn't, not because you weren't enough, but because she was comfortable. She liked knowing you were there, she liked the attention, the validation, the way you made her feel wanted, but she never wanted to give that same certainty back. You weren't her first choice, you were her safety net, her backup plan, her just in case. And staying in that position slowly destroys you. You start questioning yourself, start wondering if you're asking for too much, start lowering your standards just to keep her around. You tell yourself, maybe she's just busy, maybe she's scared, maybe if I'm more patient she'll change. But deep down you know the truth. Someone who truly wants you won't make you feel like you're fighting for their attention. They won't leave you guessing where you stand. They won't only show up when it benefits them. So leave her alone, not out of anger, not out of ego, not to prove a point. Leave her alone out of respect for yourself, because the moment you stop texting first, stop checking her stories, stop replaying conversations in your head, stop making excuses for her absence, you'll feel it, that quiet, that peace, and it'll feel unfamiliar at first because you've been living in chaos for so long you forgot what calm feels like. But that peace is real. It's the peace of no longer forcing something that was never meant to be mutual. The peace of choosing yourself after constantly choosing someone who wouldn't choose you back. She had her chance, she saw your heart, she saw your effort, she saw what you were willing to give, and if she didn't value you then, don't give her another opportunity to waste you again, because the right person won't need convincing. And the moment you truly let her go, you make room for someone who won't treat your love like an option. Choose yourself now. Walking away doesn't feel strong at first. It feels like withdrawal, like your chest is empty and heavy at the same time, like you're doing the one thing your heart keeps begging you not to do, because even when someone isn't good for you, your attachment doesn't just shut off. You still think about her when your phone lights up, still wonder if she noticed your silence, silence. Still catch yourself hoping she'll reach out just so you can feel chosen one last time. That's the part nobody talks about. Leaving someone you loved feels like betraying your own feelings. You start asking yourself if you gave up too soon, if maybe this time would have been different, if maybe you should have tried just a little harder. But here's the truth you keep avoiding. You already tried harder than she ever did. You weren't asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. Someone who truly values you won't require you to disappear to be noticed. They won't need distance to realize your worth. They won't only miss you once you finally stop showing up. And yeah, she might notice now. She might text later. She might suddenly act interested once she feels you slipping away. But don't confuse curiosity with commitment. People hate losing access. They hate losing control. They hate realizing the person they took for granted finally chose themselves. That doesn't mean she changed, it just means she felt the shift. And if you go back now, you'll teach her the same lesson again, that she can give you the bare minimum and still keep you around. Leaving is not about punishing her, it's about protecting you. It's about choosing sleep over stress, peace over potential, consistency over confusion. You're not cold for walking away, you're not heartless for setting a boundary, you're not weak for needing more than uncertainty. You're human, and you deserve a love that doesn't make you feel like you're slowly disappearing just to keep someone comfortable. Walking away hurts, but staying where you're not valued hurts longer. And one day, when the noise finally fades, you'll realize you didn't lose her. You found yourself again. Leaving her alone doesn't mean the feelings disappear. It means you finally stop letting those feelings control you. Because the hardest part isn't cutting contact. It's sitting with the silence afterward. It's waking up and realizing there's no good morning text to send, no story to check, no excuse to reach out, just to see how she's doing. Your brain will try to trick you. It'll replay the good moments, the laughs, the nights where it felt real. It'll tell you that maybe you imagined the distance, maybe you were asking for too much, maybe if you just explained yourself better she would have stayed, but you already explained yourself through effort, through patience, through showing up when it wasn't convenient. Love doesn't need translation. If she wanted to choose you, she wouldn't have kept you guessing. She wouldn't have made you feel like your presence was optional. She wouldn't have treated your consistency like something she could always come back to later. You weren't confusing. You were clear. She just wasn't committed. And yeah, it hurts realizing that the person you'd fight for wouldn't even fight for clarity with you. That's when you have to stop romanticizing the potential and start respecting the reality. Reality is this: you were giving girlfriend level energy to someone who kept you at arm's length. You were loyal to someone who wasn't sure she wanted you at all. Walking away feels unnatural because you're not used to choosing yourself first. You're used to being patient, understanding, giving people time to figure you out while you slowly lose pieces of yourself in the process. But love isn't supposed to cost you your peace. The moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop explaining, the moment you stop waiting for her to finally get it, you reclaim your power. And that scares people who benefited from you staying small. You didn't lose her. You outgrew the version of yourself that was willing to accept half love, and this is only the beginning. And the truth you don't want to admit yet is that leaving her alone feels like you're losing something. Not because she was right for you, but because she became familiar. You got used to waiting, used to hoping, used to reading into crumbs like they were signs. You trained your nervous system to find comfort in inconsistency. So when you finally step back, your body panics before your mind understands. You'll feel restless. You'll feel tempted to break your own boundary. You'll pick up your phone for no reason, scroll, close the app, open it again, just to see if maybe this time she noticed you're gone. And that urge doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're detoxing from someone who kept you emotionally hungry. Because when someone keeps you half-fed, you start confusing starvation with love. You tell yourself, maybe she just didn't know how much I cared. Maybe if I stayed a little longer, maybe I gave up too soon. But you didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you cared too much to keep abandoning yourself. You stayed long enough to know the pattern, the delayed replies, the empty apologies, the promises that never turned into action. You stayed long enough to realize that if someone wanted to show up for you, you wouldn't have to convince them. And deep down, you know that. That's why the silence hits different now. It's not empty, it's honest. For the first time, you're not waiting for her mood to decide your worth. You're not shrinking yourself to stay chosen. You're not wondering if today's the day she finally treats you right. And yeah, it hurts. Because healing doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels lonely. But loneliness with self-respect will always be quieter than love that keeps you anxious. One day you'll look back and realize leaving her alone was the moment everything started changing. Not because she came back, but because you finally came back to yourself. At some point, you have to ask yourself a hard question. How long are you willing to wait for someone to finally treat you right? Not because they're evil, not because they're a bad person, but because they keep showing you over and over that you're not a priority. And the scary part, you already know the answer. You've known it for a while. You just didn't want to accept it. Because accepting it means admitting that the future you imagined with them was built more on hope than reality. You weren't in love with what was happening. You were in love with what could have happened if they just showed up the way you needed. So you stayed, you waited, you overextended yourself, you gave patience to someone who gave you uncertainty, you gave loyalty to someone who gave you mixed signals, you gave understanding to someone who never tried to understand you, and every time they pulled away, you blamed yourself. Maybe I'm asking for too much, maybe I'm being dramatic, maybe this is just how love is, but love is not confusion. Love is not constantly guessing where you stand. Love is not feeling anxious every time your phone lights up or doesn't. Love doesn't make you feel replaceable. What really kept you stuck wasn't them. It was the version of you that believed walking away meant you failed, but leaving doesn't mean you lost. It means you finally stopped losing yourself, because staying with someone who makes you feel unwanted slowly erodes your confidence in ways you don't notice at first. You stop speaking up, you stop expecting effort, you start accepting bare minimum behavior and calling it maturity, you start shrinking your needs so you don't scare them away, and that's when love stops being love and starts becoming survival. You don't need to be less to be loved. You don't need to be quieter, cooler, easier, more convenient. The right person won't feel overwhelmed by your care. They won't feel annoyed by your presence. They won't treat your love like something disposable. They'll meet you where you are instead of making you feel like you're always asking for too much. And choosing yourself feels lonely at first because you're breaking a habit. You're breaking the habit of chasing, the habit of waiting, the habit of hoping someone will finally choose you. But peace doesn't arrive loud. It arrives quietly. In the moments you stop checking your phone, stop explaining yourself, stop wondering why you weren't enough, one day you'll realize you don't miss them. You miss who you were before you started doubting your worth, and that version of you, they're still there. You didn't lose love, you protected it. You didn't walk away from something good. You walked away from something that was slowly breaking you. And that's not weakness, that's growth. And what nobody tells you is that once you finally stop chasing them, that's when everything gets quiet. Not empty quiet, honest quiet. No more checking your phone every 5 minutes. No more replaying conversations in your head, wondering if you said the wrong thing. No more anxiety before hitting send. No more hoping today will be the day they suddenly care more. At first it feels uncomfortable because chaos became familiar, confusion felt normal, and peace feels strange when you're not used to it. You might even miss them for the wrong reasons. Not because they treated you well, but because your nervous system got addicted to inconsistency. You got used to highs and lows, to feeling chosen one day and invisible the next, to chasing validation instead of receiving love. That kind of pattern messes with your head. It makes you mistake emotional stress for passion. It makes stability feel boring and uncertainty feel exciting. But real love doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't disappear when things get inconvenient. It doesn't require you to earn basic respect. Real love feels safe. Not dull, not dramatic, safe. And when you finally step away, you start noticing things you ignored before. How drained you were, how much energy you poured into someone who barely poured back, how often you made excuses for behavior that hurt you. You start realizing how much love you actually have to give, how deeply you care, how loyal you are when you choose someone. And instead of feeling ashamed of that, you begin to see it as strength, because one day, someone will meet that energy without hesitation. They won't flinch when you care deeply. They won't pull away when things get real. They won't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by being yourself. They'll choose you without you having to beg. They'll show up without being reminded. They'll make you feel wanted without confusion. And when that happens, you'll look back at the version of you who stayed too long, and you won't feel regret. You'll feel proud that you learned, proud that you walked away, proud that you chose peace over potential, because letting go wasn't the end of your story. It was the moment you finally made space for something better. At some point, you have to accept a hard truth. If they wanted to show up, they would have. If they cared the way you cared, you wouldn't be confused. You wouldn't be questioning where you stand. You wouldn't be asking strangers for advice just to understand their silence. Love isn't subtle, effort isn't hidden, interest doesn't need decoding. When someone wants you in their life, they make space, not excuses, not delays, not half responses at midnight when they're bored. And the reason it hurts so much to accept this is because you invested emotionally before you were ever chosen properly. You imagined futures, you pictured moments that never actually happened. You fell in love with potential instead of reality. That's not weakness, that's hope. But hope becomes dangerous when it keeps you stuck, when it convinces you to stay loyal to someone who treats you like an option, when it makes you believe that patience will eventually turn into priority, it won't. People don't suddenly wake up and value you after months of showing you they don't. They don't magically learn how to love you correctly once they realize you'll stay no matter what. If anything, they learn they don't have to try. And that's why walking away feels so heavy, because you're not just letting go of them. You're letting go of the version of the future you created in your head. You're grieving something that never fully existed. That kind of loss is real. You'll miss the idea of them more than the person. You'll miss what you hoped they'd become, not what they actually showed you. And that's okay. Healing doesn't mean pretending it didn't matter. It means being honest about why it did and still choosing yourself anyway. You don't need closure from someone who couldn't communicate. You don't need answers from someone who avoided accountability. Their behavior already told you everything. Silence is an answer. Distance is a decision. Inconsistency is a choice. And once you stop chasing clarity from people who benefit from your confusion, you start reclaiming your power. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving your worth. You stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's comfort. You realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And when that finally sinks in, you don't become bitter, you become selective. You start protecting your heart the same way you used to give it away. You start choosing peace over chaos, consistency over excitement, respect over attachment. Let them go, not because they're a bad person, but because they weren't your person. And the moment you truly accept that is the moment your life starts opening up in ways you couldn't see before. And the craziest part is, once you stop chasing them, you start noticing how quiet it gets. Not the painful kind of quiet, but the kind where your nervous system finally gets a break. No more checking your phone every 5 minutes. No more rereading old messages trying to find meaning. No more wondering if today will be the day they suddenly choose you. You realize how much energy you were burning just trying to feel secure with someone who never offered stability. That constant anxiety, that wasn't love. That was your intuition fighting against your attachment. Real love doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't make you feel disposable. It doesn't require you to abandon yourself just to stay connected. And yeah, letting go hurts at first. There's withdrawal. There's nights where you want to reach out, where your fingers hover over their name, where you almost convince yourself to send that one last message. But every time you don't, you build a little more self-respect. You start realizing how much of yourself you gave away to someone who never protected your heart the way you protected theirs. You weren't asking for perfection. You were asking for presence. You were asking for effort. You were asking to matter. And one day someone will meet you where you are without you having to beg, explain, or wait. They won't make you feel like you're too much. They won't make you feel like you're replaceable. They won't make you question your value in moments of silence. But you don't get to that person if you keep clinging to the ones who treat you like an option. So let this be the moment you choose differently. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Because the version of you that keeps chasing people who don't choose you deserves rest. And the version of you that finally walks away is the one that makes room for something real. A lot of people don't talk about how hard it is to walk away from someone you still care about, not because you don't see the red flags, but because you remember the good moments too clearly. You remember who they were in the beginning, the version of them that felt safe, the version that made you feel wanted, chosen, important, and you keep hoping that version will come back. That's what keeps you stuck. Not love, hope that if you wait a little longer, if you explain yourself one more time, if you give just a bit more patience, they'll finally show up the way you need them to. But hope can be dangerous when it's attached to someone who keeps proving they're not willing or ready to meet you halfway. Because every time you ignore their actions and listen to their potential instead, you teach yourself that your needs are negotiable. You start accepting inconsistency as normal, mixed signals as effort, bare minimum as love, and slowly, you stop recognizing yourself. You become quieter, more anxious, more forgiving than you should be. You start blaming yourself for their lack of effort. Maybe I asked for too much. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just how relationships are. But deep down, you know the truth. Love isn't supposed to feel like constant confusion. It isn't supposed to drain you more than it fills you. And it definitely isn't supposed to make you feel alone while you're still technically with someone. That's when you have to be honest with yourself. Not about how much you love them, but about how much staying is costing you. Because loving someone shouldn't mean losing yourself in the process. And what hurts the most is realizing that you were willing to do the hard things for someone who wouldn't even do the simple ones. You showed consistency, they showed convenience, you communicated your feelings, they avoided uncomfortable conversations, you stayed when things got messy, they pulled away the moment effort was required, and yet you still questioned yourself, you still wondered if you were the problem, if you were asking for too much, if you were expecting love the wrong way. But love isn't complicated like that. People make time for what matters to them. They protect what they value. They don't leave you guessing where you stand. The truth is, some people don't lose you because they don't care. They lose you because they never learned how to care properly. They want connection without responsibility, attention without commitment, love without effort. And you can't teach someone how to show up if they don't want to. That's why leaving isn't weakness, it's self-respect finally getting louder than attachment. It's choosing peace over potential, reality over hope, self-worth over familiar pain. Walking away doesn't mean what you felt wasn't real. It means you finally decided that you are real too. And one day you'll look back and realize that the moment you stopped chasing was the moment your life got quieter, lighter, clearer. Because the right person won't make you feel like love is something you have to earn. They'll choose you without being convinced. You stayed longer than you should have because you believed in what could be, not what actually was. You kept replaying the good moments, convincing yourself they meant more than the silence, the distance, the excuses. You ignored the way your chest felt heavy every time you waited for a reply. You ignored how drained you felt after giving everything and receiving the bare minimum. That wasn't love making you tired. That was imbalance. Real love doesn't leave you anxious. It doesn't make you feel disposable. It doesn't turn your patience into pain. And the hardest truth to accept is that some people are comfortable letting you overextend as long as it benefits them. They don't stop you. They don't reassure you. They just take until one day you finally stop giving. And when you do, they feel it. Not because they miss you, but because they miss the access. That's when they reach out, that's when they suddenly care, that's when confusion turns into regret. But by then, you've already changed. You're no longer begging to be chosen, you're no longer shrinking to fit someone else's emotional limits. You're choosing yourself the way you always wished they would choose you. And that choice, that's where your healing actually starts. At some point, you stop missing them and start missing who you were before you questioned your worth for them, before you reread messages trying to find meaning that wasn't there, or you blamed yourself for someone else's lack of effort. That's when it really hits you. You didn't lose them, you lost yourself trying to keep them. You became quieter, you thought twice before speaking. You downplayed your needs so you wouldn't seem like too much. And the crazy part is they never asked you to do that. You did it because you cared. You did it because you were afraid that being fully you would push them away. But love that only survives when you make yourself smaller was never meant to last. Real love doesn't need you to perform, it doesn't need you to chase, it doesn't make you feel replaceable the moment you stop overgiving. And once you understand that, you stop romanticizing the bare minimum, you stop calling inconsistency mystery, you stop calling neglect space, you stop calling emotional distance busy. You see it for what it really was. Someone enjoying your presence without respecting your heart. That realization hurts, but it also frees you, because now you know you're not asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And the next time someone comes along, you won't beg them to stay. You'll watch how they show up. You'll notice how they choose you without being asked. And if they don't, you'll walk away sooner. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do. And there comes a point where the pain shifts. It's no longer about missing them. It's about realizing how much of yourself you gave away just to keep them comfortable. You start remembering moments where you stayed quiet even though something hurt. Moments where you said, it's fine, when it really wasn't. Moments where you lowered your standards because you didn't want to seem demanding. You replay conversations in your head and notice how often you explained yourself, how often you justified their behavior, how often you made excuses for why they couldn't show up the way you needed, and that's when it finally clicks. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person to do what they were never willing to do. You weren't needy. You were neglected. You weren't overthinking. You were being given mixed signals. You weren't insecure. You were emotionally starved. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You realize how exhausting it was to love someone who only showed up halfway, how draining it was to constantly wonder where you stood with them, how heavy it felt to care more than you were cared for. That kind of love doesn't make you feel safe. It keeps you anxious. It keeps you waiting. It keeps you stuck in a cycle of hoping they'll change while slowly losing yourself. And the saddest part, they benefited from your patience, from your loyalty, loyalty, from your willingness to stay even when it hurt. You don't get rewarded for suffering in silence. You don't get love by proving how much pain you can tolerate. Love is supposed to feel steady. It's supposed to feel mutual. It's supposed to feel like effort is being met with effort, not excuses. So choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. It's deciding that you won't keep pouring into someone who leaves you empty. It's realizing that peace feels better than chasing potential that never becomes real. And when you finally choose yourself, you don't become cold. You become clear. Clear about what you deserve. Clear about what you won't accept again. Clear about the fact that the right person won't make you question your value in the first place. After you choose yourself, something strange happens. The noise quiets down. Your phone feels lighter. Chest doesn't feel so tight all the time. You stop waking up with that anxious feeling, wondering if today will be the day they finally show up for you or disappoint you again. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes, stop rereading old messages, stop trying to decode tone, timing, silence, because you finally understand that love was never supposed to feel like a puzzle, and that's when you realize how much energy you were wasting on someone who was unsure about you while you were sure about them. You were loving from a place of hope. They were loving from a place of convenience. You wanted depth. They wanted access. You wanted consistency. They wanted control without responsibility. And once you step back, you see how one-sided it really was. You notice how you were always the one adjusting, always the one compromising, always the one reaching out first, always the one trying to keep things alive. That's not love, that's survival mode. Real love doesn't make you feel disposable, doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just for wanting basic respect. And here's the hardest truth to accept. Potential means nothing without effort. You weren't in love with who they were. You were in love with who they could be, the version of them that only existed in your head. But you can't build a future with someone's maybe. You can't heal by holding on to what ifs. So you stop romanticizing the bare minimum. You stop giving credit for intentions that never turn into action. And slowly, your standards rise back up to where they were always meant to be. You start asking better questions. You start walking away sooner. You stop explaining your worth to people who never planned to value it. And the craziest part, the moment you stop settling, you realize how much you were settling before. You realize you don't miss them. You miss the version of yourself that believed love had to hurt to be real, but it doesn't. Love can be calm. Love can be safe. Love can feel like rest instead of stress. And once you experience that, you'll never beg for confusion again. Leaving her alone doesn't mean you stop caring overnight. Doesn't mean you suddenly forget her laugh, her voice, the way she made things feel alive for a moment. It means you finally accept the truth you've been avoiding. That love without reciprocity will slowly drain you until there's nothing left. You were pouring into someone who never learned how to pour back. And no matter how patient you were, no matter how consistent you stayed, you can't teach someone to value you if they don't want to. You kept telling yourself, maybe she's just going through something. You made excuses for the missed calls, the late replies, the emotional distance. You told yourself love was supposed to be patient, that real men stay, that walking away meant you didn't try hard enough. But here's the part nobody talks about. There's a difference between being patient and being neglected. There's a difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. And you cross that line without even realizing it. Every time you texted first, every time you ignored your own gut, every time you accepted the bare minimum just to keep her close, you taught yourself that your needs came second. You shrank yourself to fit into a space she barely made room for. And that does something to you. It makes you question your worth. It makes you wonder why loving someone feels like punishment. It makes you think something is wrong with you. And the truth is, you were just loving the wrong person. Leaving her alone is the first time you choose yourself. It's the first time you stop begging for effort and start demanding peace. It's realizing that love isn't supposed to feel like anxiety, confusion, or constant doubt. The right person won't make you question where you stand. They won't make you compete with silence. They won't make you feel disposable. You don't need closure from her. You don't need one last conversation. Her actions already told you everything you needed to know. And as hard as it is, walking away now is what protects the part of you that still believes in real love. Part of you that deserves consistency, reassurance, and effort without having to ask. This isn't about her anymore. It's about you learning that choosing peace is not weakness, it's growth. What hurts the most isn't even losing her. It's realizing how long you stayed when your heart was begging you to leave. It's remembering all the moments you felt small but ignored it because loving her felt bigger than loving yourself. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you hoped, because you saw potential, because you believed that if you loved hard enough, showed up enough, proved yourself enough, things would change. But love doesn't work like that. You can't love someone into choosing you. You can't be consistent enough to make someone consistent back. You can't sacrifice your peace forever and call it love. At some point, staying becomes more painful than leaving, and that's where you are now. You're gonna have nights where you almost text her, nights where your fingers hover over her name, where your mind starts replaying the good memories and conveniently forgets the pain. You'll miss the comfort of what was familiar, even if it wasn't healthy. That doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you're human. Healing doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop going back. And slowly, without even realizing it, things will start to change. You'll wake up one day and notice your chest doesn't feel as heavy. You won't check your phone as much. Her name won't be the first thing on your mind when something good or bad happens. You'll start laughing again. Not forced, not distracted, but real. You'll start feeling like yourself again. That's when you'll understand why it had to end. Not because she was evil, not because you were unlovable, but because she wasn't capable of meeting you where you stood. And staying would have cost you parts of yourself you can't afford to lose. One day, someone will choose you without hesitation, without confusion, without making you question your worth. And when that happens, you'll look back and realize leaving her alone was the moment your life finally started loving forward. And listen, there's something nobody really prepares you for after you finally walk away. The quiet, not the peaceful kind at first, the kind where there's no chaos, no waiting on replies, no wondering if today will be the day she finally shows up the way you need her to. That silence can feel uncomfortable because you got used to emotional noise, you got used to the highs and lows, the hope, the disappointment, the cycle, and when it's gone, your mind almost panics like it lost something important. But what it really lost was the stress. You're going to question yourself. You'll wonder if you were too harsh, too impatient, too emotional. You'll replay conversations and think, maybe I should have said this differently. Maybe I should have tried one more time. But understand this. If someone truly wanted to stay, they wouldn't have made you feel like you had to beg for effort. You wouldn't have had to over-explain your feelings. You wouldn't have felt like loving them was a constant uphill battle. The version of you that stayed too long did so because he believed in love. And that's not something to be ashamed of, but the version of you now, he's learning discernment. He's learning that love without respect will drain you. That potential means nothing without action. And that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. You didn't lose her. You released someone who was blocking the path to someone better, someone who won't confuse consistency with boredom, someone who won't make you feel like an option, someone who won't need reminders of your worth. Right now, it might feel like you're walking alone, but you're not going backwards anymore, and that's everything. And one day, without even realizing it, you're gonna wake up, and she won't be the first thought on your mind anymore. Not because you stopped caring overnight, not because what you felt wasn't real, but because you finally gave yourself permission to move forward. The memories won't disappear, but they won't control you either. They'll just be reminders of what you survived, not what you're missing. You'll start to notice how much lighter you feel, how your chest isn't tight every time your phone buzzes, how you're not constantly checking stories, rereading old messages, or wondering why you weren't enough for someone who never knew how to love you properly in the first place. You'll realize how much of yourself you were giving away to someone who kept taking without ever pouring back into you, and that's when it hits you. The problem was never your effort. It was never your heart being too big. It was never you loving too deeply. The problem was that you were offering loyalty to someone who didn't know how to value it. You were offering consistency to someone addicted to convenience. And you were offering real love to someone who only liked the idea of being loved. Walking away wasn't a loss. It was a correction, a reset, a moment where you finally chose peace over potential, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over attachment. That takes strength most people don't have. So don't go back. Not when she gets lonely, not when she suddenly remembers your value, not when she realizes nobody else loved her the way you did, because by then you'll understand something important. Someone who truly wants you won't need to lose you to see your worth. Leave her alone, and finally let yourself be found by someone who won't ever make you question if you matter. I stayed loyal. That's the part that messes with me the most. Not because I regret it, but because I know I was real the whole time. I didn't switch up. I didn't look for other options. I didn't keep backups just in case. When I said I was with her, I meant it. Even when things fell off, even when her energy started changing, even when I had moments where I could have pulled back and protected myself, I didn't. Because in my head, loyalty wasn't something you give only when it's easy. It's something you keep, especially when it's not. So I stayed consistent, I stayed patient, I stayed solid in a situation that slowly stopped being solid back. And the crazy part is, while I was staying loyal, she wasn't. The part that's hard to explain is how I stayed the same, even when everything around me started changing. I noticed it, the distance, the shift in energy, the way conversations didn't feel the same anymore. I'm not blind, I saw the signs, but I chose to stay loyal anyway, because I told myself something simple. If I'm real about this, I don't switch up just because it gets uncomfortable. So I didn't match her energy when it dropped. I didn't start moving different. I didn't go looking for someone else. Just because things felt uncertain, I stayed. I kept showing up the same way I always did. And maybe that was my mistake, not being loyal, but being loyal to someone who had already started moving differently behind the scenes. Because while I was protecting what we had, she was slowly stepping out of it, and I didn't want to believe that because loyalty makes you believe in what something was, even when it's no longer what it is. The truth didn't hit me all at once, it came in pieces, little realizations that didn't fully make sense at first, moments where things felt off, but not off enough to walk away. I would notice small things, the way she moved differently, the way her attention felt split, the way her consistency started depending on her mood, and every time I noticed it, I told myself the same thing. Don't overthink it, because when you're loyal, you don't want to accuse someone of something they haven't admitted. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You trust what you had, instead of questioning what it's becoming. So I stayed grounded, I stayed the same. I kept treating her like she was still fully in it, even when deep down I could feel she wasn't. And that's the part that hurts the most. Not that she switched up, but that I stayed solid while she was already moving differently. At some point, the truth became impossible to ignore, not because she said it, but because her actions started saying it for her. You can feel when someone isn't fully there anymore. You don't need proof, you don't need confirmation. It's in the energy, the way they reply, the way they move, the way they stop showing up the same way they used to. And I felt that, but I stayed loyal anyway, because I kept thinking loyalty meant holding on, holding it together, holding on to what we had, even if it was slipping. But here's what I didn't understand at the time. You can't hold something together by yourself, and I was the only one holding. The more I look back at it, the more I realize something that's hard to accept. I wasn't just being loyal, I was ignoring reality, because loyalty doesn't mean staying blind. It doesn't mean pretending everything is okay when it's clearly not. But that's what I was doing. I was staying consistent in a situation that was becoming inconsistent. I was giving the same energy to someone who had already started giving less, and the imbalance kept growing slowly, quietly, until it was obvious. But by then, I had already invested too much to walk away easily, and then it finally happened. Not in some dramatic way, not in a way that gave me closure, just clarity. She wasn't loyal, not in the way I was. While I was choosing her every day, she was leaving space for something else, maybe someone else, maybe just options, but either way, she wasn't standing where I was standing. And that realization hits different, because it's not just about losing someone, it's about realizing you weren't standing on the same level the whole time. For a while, that made me question everything, not just her, myself. I started thinking, was I too loyal? Did I stay too solid? Should I have moved differently? Because when someone hurts you while you're being real, it makes you feel like being real was the mistake, but it wasn't. Loyalty wasn't the problem. Giving it to the wrong person was, and that's the shift that took time to understand. Because I didn't lose by being loyal. I didn't lose because I stayed real. If anything, that's the part I kept. That's the part that didn't change. She changed. She moved different. She chose differently. But me, I stayed who I said I was. And that matters more than it feels like it does in the moment. And because here's the truth, no one tells you right away. Being loyal to the wrong person will hurt, but it will also teach you exactly what real loyalty should look like When it's returned, it shows you the difference between someone who says they care and someone who actually stands on it. And once you've felt that difference, you stop settling for anything less. You stop accepting half effort. You stop excusing inconsistency because now you know what it feels like to give fully. So next time, you expect it back. So yeah, I stayed loyal and she didn't, and for a while that felt like I lost, but now I see it differently because loyalty isn't something you regret, it's something you protect. You just learn who deserves it. The right person won't make you question it, won't make you feel like you're the only one holding things together, won't make you feel stupid for being real. They'll match it naturally, consistently, without you having to ask. So no, I'm not changing the way I love, I'm just changing who I give it to. Because being loyal isn't the mistake. Giving it to someone who wasn't is. Unrequited love is a quiet kind of pain, the kind that doesn't make noise. It just sits with you. It's loving someone who laughs with you, but never looks at you the way you look at them. They're comfortable around you. They trust you. They tell you things. And every time they talk about someone else, you smile, while something inside you cracks just a little more. You learn how to swallow words before they escape, compliments you never say, feelings you never confess, because deep down you already know the answer, so you love them quietly. You notice everything about them, their habits, their moods, the small details nobody else pays attention to, knowing full well you'll never live in their memory the way they live in yours. Somehow you convince yourself it's okay, that being close to them, even like this, is better than being without them at all. You give without expecting, you care without being chosen, you love without being loved back, and that hurts in ways you can't explain, but unrequited love teaches you something too. It shows you how deep your heart really is, how much you're capable of feeling, even when nothing is returned. Just don't disappear inside someone who can't meet you where you are, because one day someone will, and they'll give back everything you once gave away in silence. The hardest part about unrequited love isn't just that they don't feel the same, it's that they're close enough to keep the hope alive. They don't reject you outright, they don't shut the door, they just exist in your life. They text you, they lean on you, they laugh with you, and every small moment feels like maybe you're not imagining it. So you hold on. You tell yourself you're being patient. That timing is the issue, that one day they'll see what you feel so clearly, but deep down, you know you're waiting for something they never promised. And that's why it's so hard to leave, because unrequited love doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like unfinished business. You don't walk away angry, you walk away confused. You wonder if you should have said more, if you should have been quieter, if you waited too long, or tried too hard, and instead of letting go, you stay emotionally tethered, not because you're weak, but because your heart hasn't been given a clean ending, so it keeps hoping, keeps replaying moments, keeps searching for signs that maybe you still matter to them in that way, and that hope is what keeps the pain alive. You begin to wonder why you're always the one feeling more, why you're always the one waiting, why love seems so easy for others but feels just out of reach for you. You start shrinking your needs, telling yourself you don't want much anyway, convincing yourself that loving quietly is enough, but it's not, because caring without being chosen slowly teaches your heart that it should settle for less. You catch yourself doing things just to stay close, being extra understanding, always available, always forgiving. Not because you're weak, but because you're afraid that asking for more will push them away completely. So you accept crumbs and call it connection, and the longer this goes on, the more invisible you start to feel, not just to them, but to yourself. You forget what it feels like to be desired, to be someone's first choice, to be loved out loud, and that's the quiet danger of unrequited love. It doesn't just hurt you, it slowly teaches you to disappear. There's a reason unrequited love is so hard to walk away from. Not just love, it's anticipation. You live in the space of almost chosen, almost wanted, almost enough. Your brain starts clinging to small moments. a long conversation, a shared laugh, a look that might mean something, and those moments keep you hooked because when love isn't returned, your mind fills in the gaps with possibility. You imagine what could be instead of facing what is, and every time you think about letting go, you feel like you're giving up on a future that was never actually promised. So you stay hopeful, you stay available, you stay emotionally invested, not because it feels good, but because walking away feels like loss, even though nothing was ever yours. That's the trap. Unrequited love keeps you chasing closure from someone who doesn't know they're holding it, and the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to separate love from longing. You don't just miss them, you miss the version of yourself that believed it might work. At some point you feel it, the imbalance. You realize you're giving more than you're receiving, and then emotionally, mentally, quietly, you're investing energy into someone who isn't investing back. You plan around them, you think about them, you hold space for them, and they just live their life. That's when it starts to hurt differently, not sharp pain, but exhaustion. You're tired of wondering, tired of hoping, tired of pretending you're okay with crumbs. You notice how much of yourself is tied up in someone who doesn't even know how deeply you care. And for the first time, you ask yourself a hard question. If nothing changes, then how long can I keep doing this? Because loving someone in silence means you never get reassurance, never get clarity, never get chosen, and slowly, it teaches your heart that effort doesn't lead to safety. That love means waiting, that closeness means sacrifice, and that's not fair to you. Love isn't supposed to drain you, it isn't supposed to make you feel invisible, it isn't supposed to cost you your sense of worth, and realizing that is the beginning of letting go, even if your heart isn't ready yet. Letting go doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels wrong. It feels like you're giving up on someone you care about, like you're betraying something that meant a lot to you, even if it was never returned. You start questioning yourself. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Should I just keep loving them quietly like before? Because walking away doesn't just mean losing them. It means losing the hope you've been holding on to. And hope is hard to release. You've built routines around them, emotions around them, a future that only existed in your head but still felt real. So choosing yourself feels like cruelty at first, like you're the one causing the pain, but staying was hurting you too. Just slower, just quieter. And that's the part people don't talk about. Sometimes self-respect feels like grief, sometimes growth feels like loss, sometimes choosing yourself feels worse than continuing to wait, but guilt doesn't mean you're wrong, it just means you cared deeply, and caring deeply doesn't obligate you to keep hurting yourself in silence. After you finally choose yourself, something unexpected happens. It feels empty, not peaceful, not freeing, just quiet in a way that's uncomfortable. You're no longer waiting for their message, no longer replaying conversations, no longer building your day around the possibility of them. And at first, that absence hurts more than the waiting did, because unrequited love filled space. It gave your emotions somewhere to go. It gave your heart something to hold on to, even if it was hurting you. Though when it's gone, you don't immediately feel relief. You feel loss. You miss the closeness. You miss the routine. You even miss the hope, as painful as it was. And that makes you question your decision. You wonder if you left too early, if you should have tried harder, if loneliness is worse than longing. But this part matters, because this emptiness isn't failure, it's withdrawal. Your heart is unlearning a pattern, and unlearning always feels uncomfortable before it feels right. You didn't lose love, you made room for it, even if nothing has filled that space yet. One day after the emptiness settles, something shifts. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. You start noticing how much lighter you feel without carrying love alone. You realize how much energy you used to spend hoping, waiting, adjusting, shrinking, all for someone who never met you where you stood. And for the first time, you don't miss them. You miss the idea of being chosen. That's an important difference, because now you know what it feels like to give deeply, and you also know what it costs when nothing comes back. So when love shows up again one day, it feels different. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't leave you guessing. It doesn't ask you to love in silence. It meets you halfway. You don't have to hide how much you care. You don't have to settle for almost. You don't have to convince yourself that crumbs are enough. And that's when you understand something fully. Unrequited love wasn't wasted. It taught you the depth of your heart. It proved you're capable of loving purely, selflessly, fully. But it was never meant to be your ending, because love isn't meant to be endured alone. It's meant to be shared. And one day someone will choose you as openly as you choose them. No silence, no guessing, no imbalance, just love. She said I wasn't man enough, and I won't lie, that one stuck, not because I believe it, but because when someone you love questions your masculinity, it hits somewhere deeper than regular criticism. It's not just about behavior, it's identity. It's everything you thought you were doing right suddenly being reframed as weakness. What does man enough even mean? Because I showed up, I communicated, I stayed loyal, I tried to fix things instead of run from them. But apparently that wasn't enough. Apparently being calm instead of aggressive was a problem. Apparently wanting to talk things through instead of shutting down made me soft. Apparently expressing emotion made me less of a man. And that's when I realized something dangerous. Some people confuse masculinity with dominance. They confuse emotional control with emotional absence. They confuse stability with weakness. And if that's the definition she was using, then maybe I was never supposed to fit it. But still, when she said it, it made me question myself. Because no matter how confident you are, words like that linger. They make you replay moments. They make you wonder if you should have been tougher, colder, less available, less understanding. And that's how toxic standards start reshaping you quietly. I started analyzing everything after that. Was I too patient, too willing to compromise, too quick to apologize? Because I thought being a man meant being responsible, being accountable, being emotionally mature. But maybe she wanted something louder, more dominant, more unpredictable, and that's confusing because society tells men two opposite things. Be strong, but don't be cold. Be vulnerable, but don't be weak. Lead, but don't control. And somehow you're supposed to balance all of it perfectly. So when she said I wasn't man enough, I started wondering, was I too emotionally available? Was I too steady? Was I not exciting enough? But here's the truth that took me time to accept. Being consistent doesn't make you less of a man. Being calm doesn't make you less masculine. Being emotionally intelligent doesn't make you weak. It makes you evolved. And not everyone is comfortable with evolved. Some people are used to chaos, used to intensity, used to men who are hard to access emotionally. So when they meet someone who communicates clearly and stands firm without yelling, it feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar can feel unmanly to someone who's been conditioned differently. But that's not my problem to fix. The deeper issue wasn't her words. It was what they tried to take from me. My confidence, because when someone attacks your masculinity, they're attacking your foundation. They're saying you're not enough as you are, and that's heavy. But here's what I had to learn. If being man enough means being emotionally unavailable, if it means suppressing how I feel, if it means pretending I don't care, if it means dominating instead of communicating, then I don't want that version of masculinity, because strength isn't loud. It's controlled, it's stable, it's secure enough to not overreact. It's confident enough to not prove itself constantly. And maybe she mistook calm for weak. Maybe she mistook kindness for softness. Maybe she mistook emotional awareness for insecurity. But that doesn't redefine me, it just shows what she was used to. What hurt the most wasn't that she left, it was that she framed it like I lacked something. Like I needed to become more, like I needed to step up into some undefined standard. But love isn't about becoming someone else to fit someone's idea of masculinity. It's about alignment. If she needed someone louder, more dominant, more emotionally distant, that's preference, not proof that I wasn't enough. Wasn't. Because being man enough shouldn't mean performing toughness. It should mean integrity, leadership, emotional control, responsibility, and I had all of that, just not in a way that matched her expectations, and that's okay. I realized something important after sitting with it. The right woman won't question your masculinity. She'll feel safe in it. She won't need you to be aggressive to feel protected. She won't need you to be emotionally shut down to feel secure. She won't test your dominance to measure your worth. She'll recognize strength in stability. She'll see leadership and accountability. She'll see masculinity in consistency, because real masculinity isn't about intimidation. It's about presence. It's about knowing who you are without needing to prove it constantly. And here's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes when someone says you're not man enough, what they really mean is you're not toxic enough for what I'm used to. Because chaos feels passionate to some people, silence feels strong to some people, emotional distance feels masculine to some people, but healthy masculinity feels boring if you're addicted to instability, and that's not an insult, it's reality. Some people equate unpredictability with strength, and when they meet steadiness, they don't know what to do with it. I had to ask myself something hard. Was I actually lacking, or was I just not performing? Because there's a difference. Lacking means I don't possess something. Performing means I'm pretending to, and I refuse to perform masculinity for approval. I refuse to become colder just to seem stronger. I refuse to suppress my emotional intelligence just to look dominant, because the right person won't require that. They'll appreciate it. If anything, being called not man enough forced me to define what that means for myself. To me, being a man means standing on your word, protecting without controlling, communicating without yelling, being emotionally disciplined, owning your mistakes, leading with stability, and I did all of that. So if that wasn't enough for her, it doesn't mean I failed. It means we defined strength differently. I won't let one person's perception reshape my identity, because masculinity isn't loud. It isn't about dominance. It isn't about intimidation. It's about internal control. It's about consistency. It's about knowing who you are when no one is watching. And if someone mistakes calm strength for weakness, that says more about what they're used to than what I am. She said I wasn't man enough, but I am man enough to walk away instead of yelling, stay calm instead of escalating, express how I feel instead of suppressing it, choose growth instead of ego. And that's the kind of man I'll stay, because the right woman won't need me to prove my masculinity. She'll feel secure in it, and I'd rather be steady and misunderstood than loud and respected for something I'm not. If being man enough means losing emotional depth, then I'll pass. Because real strength doesn't shout, it stands. I found out what she really thought of me, and I wish I didn't, because in my head, it was different. I thought she respected me. I thought she valued me. I thought the way I showed up actually meant something to her. But the truth, it wasn't what I believed. And it didn't come out in a direct way. Not a conversation. Not something she sat me down and said. It came out indirectly. Through things I wasn't supposed to hear. Through how she spoke when I wasn't around. And that's when it hit me. The version of me in her head wasn't the same as the version of me I thought she saw. At first I didn't want to believe it because it didn't match how she acted around me. With me, she seemed calm, interested, like she actually cared. But what I heard didn't sound like that version of her at all. It sounded detached, like I wasn't that important, like I was just there. And that's what messes with you. When someone treats you one way to your face and thinks something completely different behind it, because now you don't know what was real, the way she talked to you, or the way she talked about you. And once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. Every memory started changing. Moments that felt genuine started feeling questionable. Things she said started sounding different in my head, because now I was looking at everything through a new lens, a more honest one. And the more I thought about it, the more it started making sense. Why sometimes her energy felt off. Why sometimes I felt like I was trying harder. Why something always felt slightly uneven. I just didn't want to accept it back then. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe they see you differently than you see them. You want to believe it's mutual, that the respect is equal, that the value is the same on both sides. But it wasn't. Not really. Because if she truly saw me the way I thought she did, she wouldn't have spoken about me like that. She wouldn't have minimized what I was giving. She wouldn't have treated my presence like something replaceable. And that's the part that hits your ego. Not in a loud way, in a quiet way. Because now you're not just dealing with losing her. You're dealing with realizing how little you meant in her perspective. While you were taking her seriously, she wasn't taking you the same way. And that imbalance, it hurts more than the ending. For a while I started questioning myself, like maybe I misread everything. Maybe I thought it was deeper than it actually was. Maybe I gave too much meaning to something that wasn't built to hold it. Because when someone sees you as less than what you believed, it makes you feel like you got it wrong. But here's what I had to understand. Just because she didn't value me properly doesn't mean I wasn't valuable. The problem wasn't who I was, it was how she saw me. And you can't control that. You can show up right, you can be real, you can be consistent, but if someone already has a limited view of you, they're going to treat you based on that, no matter how you show up. And that's why nothing I did changed it, because the issue wasn't effort, it was perception. Once I understood that, the pain started shifting, because now it wasn't about trying to prove something to her anymore, it was about realizing I was giving energy to someone who didn't even see it properly. And that's a different kind of clarity, because it makes you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to be understood by someone who already decided how they see you. And honestly, I'm glad I found out, even though it hurt, because I would have kept going, thinking it was deeper than it actually was, thinking she valued me the way I valued her, and that would have kept me stuck. But the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, it frees you. So yeah, then I found out what she really thought of me, and it wasn't what I expected, but now I see it clearly. The right person doesn't make you question your value. They don't talk about you like you're nothing. They don't treat you like you're replaceable. They see you fully, clearly, and they move accordingly. So I'm not mad at what I found out. I'm just glad I didn't stay blind to it, because now I know one thing for sure. I'd rather know the truth than keep believing something that was never real. I think the hardest thing to admit now is that I waited too long for her. Not a few days, not a few weeks. I'm talking about months of believing that eventually she would see me the way I saw her. Because when you really care about someone, patience feels like loyalty. You tell yourself that love isn't supposed to be rushed, that real connections take time, that sometimes people just need space to figure things out. So I gave her that space. I stayed patient when things felt uncertain. I stayed loyal even when the energy between us started shifting. And every time something felt off, I told myself the same thing. Just give it time. Time would make her realize how much I cared. Time would make the connection stronger. Time would make everything finally fall into place. But looking back now, I realize something painful. Sometimes time doesn't fix things. Sometimes time just shows you what someone was never going to choose. And while I was waiting, she was slowly moving in a different direction. Well, when you wait for someone you care about, it doesn't feel like you're wasting time. It feels like you're being loyal. You tell yourself that patience is proof that your feelings are real, that if you just stay consistent long enough, eventually they'll see what's right in front of them. So that's what I did. I stayed. Even when the signs started becoming confusing, there were moments where she would pull closer again. Moments where the conversations felt like they used to. Moments where she would say things that made it seem like maybe, just maybe, we were finally getting somewhere. And every time that happened, it reset my hope. It made me believe the waiting was worth it. Because hope is powerful. Hope convinces you that the future will eventually match the way you feel. But the problem with hope is that it can keep you standing in the same place while the other person is slowly walking somewhere else. And I didn't see that at the time, because while I was waiting for things to become clearer, she was slowly becoming less certain about us. And the scariest part is how quietly that shift happens. It doesn't start with a big moment. It starts with small changes, replies that come slower, conversations that feel shorter, energy that feels just a little different than before. At first you ignore it because you tell yourself the same thing you've been telling yourself the whole time. Just give it time. But sometimes time doesn't move people closer. Sometimes it slowly moves them away. And by the time you realize that, you've already waited longer than you should have. The strange thing about waiting for someone is that you don't realize how much time you're giving away until you look back at it. While I was waiting for her to figure out her feelings, my whole mindset was built around patience. I told myself that real connections take time, that people sometimes need space before they realize what's right in front of them. So whenever things felt uncertain, I convinced myself that uncertainty was just part of the process. I thought eventually she would see me the way I saw her, but the longer I waited, the more the relationship started feeling one-sided. Not in obvious ways. She still talked to me. She still checked in sometimes. She still kept the connection alive just enough that it never felt completely over. And that's the part that kept me there, because every small moment of closeness made it seem like progress. Like maybe we were finally moving towards something real. But looking back now, those moments didn't mean we were getting closer. They just meant she wasn't ready to fully let me go yet. And there's a big difference between someone building something with you and someone keeping you close while they're still figuring out what they want. At the time, I couldn't see that difference clearly. All I knew was that I cared about her, and I believed that eventually she would care about me the same way. So I stayed patient, even when the signs started becoming harder to ignore, even when the connection started feeling less stable than it used to. Because once you invest that much time waiting for someone, it becomes harder to walk away. You start telling yourself that leaving now would mean all that waiting was for nothing. So you stay longer, you give it more time, you hope just a little more, and that's how you end up realizing something painful later on. You didn't just wait for her. You waited too long. The hardest part about waiting too long for someone is realizing that the time you gave them was real, even if the outcome wasn't. Because every day I stayed patient, I believed it meant something. Every message I sent, every conversation where I tried to understand her better, every moment where I chose to stay instead of walking away when things felt uncertain, to me those moments were proof that I cared, proof that the connection mattered enough to fight for. But there's something difficult about waiting that you don't notice until it's already happened. Waiting slowly turns into hoping, and hoping slowly turns into ignoring reality. There were signs that things weren't moving the way I thought they were. Moments where her effort didn't match mine. Moments where the connection felt like it was staying in the same place instead of growing. Moments where it felt like I was investing more emotionally than she was. But every time I noticed those signs, I told myself the same thing. Just give it more time. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe the connection might not lead anywhere. You want to believe the patience will eventually pay off. But the truth is, patience only works when both people are moving toward the same thing. If one person is waiting while the other person is slowly drifting away, time doesn't bring you closer. It just stretches the distance. And by the time I started realizing that, I had already waited longer than I should have. Another thing about waiting too long for someone is how quietly it changes your life. Because when you're emotionally invested in someone, your decisions start revolving around them. You hold space for them in your future. You imagine what things could become. You avoid moving on because a part of you still believes they might eventually choose you. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't explore other connections. I didn't let myself get too close to anyone else because, in my mind, I was already committed to her, even if the relationship wasn't fully defined. And that's the trap of waiting. You stay emotionally loyal to someone who hasn't fully chosen you yet, not because you're naive, but because you believe loyalty will eventually be recognized. You believe that if someone sees how patient you are, how consistent you are, how much you care, they'll eventually realize you're the right person. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people appreciate your patience, sometimes they even care about you, but that doesn't always mean they'll choose you. And that's a painful thing to understand, because it means the time you gave them didn't guarantee the future you imagined. And when that realization finally hits, you start asking yourself a difficult question. Was I waiting for the right person? Or was I waiting for someone who was never going to choose me in the first place? Once I started asking myself that question, honestly, everything began to look different. Because when you stop looking at the situation through hope, you start seeing it through clarity, and clarity shows you things you didn't want to notice before. Like how often I was the one reaching out first, how often I was the one trying to keep the connection alive, how often I was the one convincing myself that things would eventually work out. At the time, I thought that was just what patience looked like, but now I understand something important. Patience in a relationship only makes sense when both people are building something together. If only one person is investing time, effort, and emotional energy, that's not patience. That's imbalance. And I was standing in that imbalance longer than I should have, because I kept believing that eventually the effort would be returned, eventually the connection would stabilize, eventually she would see me the same way I saw her, but eventually never came. And the hardest part about realizing that isn't just the heartbreak, it's realizing how much time you spent waiting for something that was never truly moving toward you. For a while, that realization made me feel foolish, because it made me feel like I should have known sooner, like I should have seen the signs earlier, like I should have walked away the moment things started feeling uncertain. But the truth is, caring about someone doesn't make you foolish, it makes you human. When you believe in someone, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want to believe their uncertainty is temporary. You want to believe the connection you feel will eventually become mutual, so you stay longer, you give more time, you hope a little harder, and sometimes that hope leads to something real. But sometimes it just leads to a lesson. And the lesson I learned is something I'll never forget. You shouldn't have to wait indefinitely for someone to recognize your value. If someone truly sees you as part of their future, they don't leave you standing in uncertainty for months. They choose you, and they show that choice through their actions. Once I understood that, the pain started changing into something else. Perspective. Because waiting too long for someone doesn't mean you were weak. It means you believed in the possibility of something meaningful. And there's nothing wrong with believing in people, but there's a difference between believing in someone and ignoring the reality of their actions, because actions always tell the truth eventually. Someone who truly wants you doesn't keep you waiting forever. They don't keep you guessing about where you stand. They don't keep you in a place where you feel like you're hoping more than you're building. They make their intentions clear, and if someone doesn't do that, the waiting only leads to one outcome. Eventually you realize you were holding space for someone who wasn't holding space for you. When I finally stopped waiting for her, something surprising happened. I started getting my clarity back. Because when you're waiting for someone emotionally, a part of your life feels paused. Your focus stays tied to the possibility of what could happen. Your decisions revolve around the connection. Your energy stays invested in someone who might not even be moving in the same direction. But the moment you stop waiting, everything shifts. You start seeing things more objectively. You start realizing how much emotional energy you were giving to someone who wasn't fully present, and you start understanding something important. The time you spent waiting wasn't wasted. It taught you exactly what you should never accept again. Looking back now, I can honestly say I waited too long for her, but I don't regret caring. I don't regret being patient, because those things say something about who I am. What I do regret is staying in uncertainty longer than I should have, because the right person doesn't make you wait forever to feel chosen. They don't keep you in a constant state of hoping. They don't make you question whether the connection is real. They make their intentions clear. They meet your effort with their own, and they move forward with you, not away from you. So yeah, I waited too long for her, but that experience taught me something I'll carry with me forever. Next time I won't stay in a place where I feel like I'm waiting to be chosen, because the right connection doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like moving forward together. You keep ignoring the red flags because all you want is love, not peace, not respect, not consistency, just love. You see the signs, you see the unanswered calls, the constant busy, the way you're always an option, never a priority. And instead of asking why it hurts, you ask how to endure it. You tell yourself it's patience, that it's loyalty, that love means staying even when it costs you. But let's be honest, she doesn't check on you. She doesn't consider your feelings. She doesn't show up the way you do. And you know that. You just don't want to face what it says about you for staying. So here's the real question you've been avoiding. How much do you actually love yourself? Because when you stay in situations that keep hurting you, when you keep accepting disrespect just to feel close to someone, that's not love. That's neglect. If you truly loved yourself, you wouldn't keep choosing pain just to feel wanted. You wouldn't keep lowering your standards to keep someone around who clearly isn't choosing you back. But you don't protect yourself, you sacrifice yourself. Because being alone scares you more than being hurt. And that's why you accept the bare minimum. That's why you stay in toxic cycles. That's why you confuse attachment with love. You're not holding on because it's good for you. You're holding on because it's the only version of love you think you deserve. And that's the lie. You don't need someone else to complete you. What you actually need is to stop outsourcing your worth. Because the moment you start loving yourself, really loving yourself, you stop begging for attention. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop calling pain connection. You stop chasing people who only show up halfway. Self-love doesn't make you selfish. It makes you unavailable to anything that keeps breaking you. And until you learn that, you'll keep calling suffering love and calling survival loyalty. You are worth more than crumbs. You are worth more than confusion. You are worth more than being an option. But no one can convince you of that until you decide to believe it yourself. Here's the truth you keep avoiding. You don't stay because you don't see the red flags. You stay because you think leaving means nobody else will love you. So you make excuses. She's busy. She's going through stuff. She just doesn't show love the same way. But effort isn't a love language. It's a choice. And when someone keeps choosing not to show up for you, that's not confusion, that's clarity. You're not being patient. You're being hopeful in a place that's already shown you who it is. You keep giving grace to people who wouldn't give you the same. You keep explaining your pain to someone who already decided it wasn't important enough to change. And every time you stay, you send yourself a message. My feelings come second. My needs are optional. This is the best I can get. That's not love. That's self-betrayal. You think walking away means losing them, but what you're really losing right now is respect for yourself, because someone who values you doesn't make you question your worth. They don't make you beg for consistency. They don't disappear and call it space. And the reason this keeps happening isn't because you love too hard. It's because you don't love yourself hard enough to leave when you should. The moment you start choosing yourself, red flags stop looking like obstacles and start looking like exits. And exits aren't failures, they're protection. Ignoring red flags doesn't just hurt you once, it trains people how to treat you. Every time you stay after disrespect, you teach them you'll tolerate it. Every time you forgive without change, you show them your boundaries don't mean much, and they adjust accordingly. They respond less. They try less, they care just enough to keep you around, but never enough to show up fully. Because why would they? You already proved you'll stay without effort. You think you're being understanding, but what you're really doing is normalizing behavior that shouldn't have access to you. You answer late replies immediately. You accept apologies without accountability. You let patterns repeat because you're afraid of starting over, and slowly, your standards drop while their comfort rises. That's the trade you're making. You're giving someone emotional safety while you live in emotional uncertainty. And the worst part? You start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're asking for too much, that you're sensitive, that this is just how relationships are. But healthy love doesn't require endurance. You don't have to survive it. You don't have to fight for basic respect. You don't have to convince someone to treat you well. Red flags aren't challenges to overcome. They're warnings to listen to, and the longer you ignore them, the harder it becomes to remember what being valued even feels like. The pattern doesn't break when they change, it breaks when you do. The reason you keep ignoring red flags is because you confuse attachment with love. Love feels steady, attachment feels urgent. Love doesn't make you anxious. Attachment keeps you checking your phone, replaying conversations, wondering where you stand, and you call that passion. But what you're really feeling is fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough, fear that if you don't hold on tight, you'll be forgotten. So you cling, you stay when you should leave, you wait when there's nothing coming. You accept excuses because they're easier than facing the truth. That truth being, someone who wants you won't make you feel optional. Attachment makes you chase because it needs reassurance. Love doesn't chase, it meets. And until you learn the difference, every red flag will feel like something you just need to work through. You'll keep calling distance space, disrespect miscommunication, inconsistency timing, but your body already knows that tight feeling in your chest, that constant unease, that feeling of giving more than you're getting. That's not love warning you to try harder. That's your self-respect telling you to stop. You don't need clearer signs. You don't need closure. You don't need one more conversation. You need the courage to admit that attachment is keeping you stuck in places love would never ask you to stay. Walking away feels harder than staying because staying lets you avoid the truth. As long as you're still there, you can tell yourself it might change, that maybe tomorrow they'll care more, that maybe you're just being tested. Hope keeps you stuck because leaving means admitting you invested in something that wasn't good for you. It means admitting you ignored your instincts, that you stayed longer than you should have, that you loved someone who couldn't meet you halfway, and that hurts your pride. So instead, you endure. You tell yourself pain is temporary, that love requires sacrifice, that every relationship has rough patches. But here's the part you don't want to hear. Love doesn't consistently make you feel small. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by wanting basic respect. You stay because leaving forces accountability, not for them, but for you. It forces you to ask why you accepted less, why you ignored the signs, why you stayed quiet when your boundaries were crossed. And that's uncomfortable. But staying is costing you more than leaving ever will. Every day you remain in a situation that disrespects you, you reinforce the belief that this is all you deserve, and that belief is the real damage. Walking away isn't giving up on love, it's giving up on self-betrayal. And the moment you finally choose yourself, red flags stop feeling confusing. They feel obvious. The moment you stop ignoring red flags, everything gets quiet. No chaos, no anxiety spikes, no constant checking to see if someone still wants you. And at first, that silence feels uncomfortable because you're used to confusion, used to emotional ups and downs, used to love feeling like something you have to manage. So when you finally walk away, your brain starts questioning you. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe this is just how love feels. But that's just withdrawal. You're not missing them. You're missing the familiarity of the pattern because ignoring red flags wasn't just about them. It was about what you were willing to tolerate to avoid being alone. now that you've chosen yourself, you start seeing things clearly. You realize how drained you were, how often you made excuses, how little you were actually asking for compared to how much you were giving, and that clarity changes you. You don't feel pulled toward inconsistency anymore. You don't chase mixed signals. You don't feel tempted by people who only show up halfway. Because once you experience peace, chaos stops feeling exciting. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop believing love has to hurt. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. And here's the biggest shift. You stop trying to be chosen. You start choosing. Who gets access to you? Who gets your time? Who gets your emotional energy? Red flags don't feel like puzzles anymore. They feel like answers. And instead of asking me, can I make this work? You ask, does this protect me? That's when self-respect kicks in. Not loud, not dramatic, just firm. When you stop ignoring red flags, people from your past don't recognize you anymore. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you stopped being convenient. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't over-justify your boundaries. You don't stay in conversations that feel disrespectful or draining, and that confuses people. They're used to the version of you that stayed quiet, that gave chances, that tried to understand at the expense of being understood. So when you walk away faster now, they call you cold. They say you've changed. They say you're doing too much. But what they really mean is, you're no longer available for the dynamic they benefited from. People who thrived on your tolerance don't like your standards. People who were comfortable with your silence don't like your clarity. And that's okay, because growth isn't about being liked, it's about being protected. You're not harsh, you're not bitter, you're not closed off. You're just done negotiating your self-respect. You no longer wait for disrespect to become unbearable before leaving. You don't need proof anymore. The first pattern is enough. And here's the part that matters most. The right people won't question this version of you. They won't push your boundaries. They won't test your tolerance. They won't need you to over-explain. They'll feel your standards and meet them naturally. Anyone who leaves because you stopped accepting red flags was never meant to stay anyway. That's not loss, that's alignment. Self-respect feels lonely at first, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you stopped tolerating what everyone else normalized. You don't have constant access to people anymore. You don't have drama to distract you. You don't have half connections keeping you entertained. And that quiet can feel heavy, because for a long time, chaos made you feel needed, inconsistency made you feel chosen, fixing things made you feel valuable. Now none of that is there, and your brain tries to convince you that you're missing out, that maybe you were happier when you stayed, that maybe standards are overrated, that maybe being lonely is worse than being disrespected. But that's just the adjustment period. You're unlearning a pattern where love had to hurt to feel real. Self-respect strips away the noise and leaves you with truth. You start seeing how many connections were built on convenience instead of care. How many people stayed because you made it easy for them, not because they valued you. And yes, that realization stings, but it also gives you something you didn't have before. Peace, no guessing, no waiting, no emotional whiplash, just clarity. And from that clarity, your standards get quieter but stronger. You don't announce them, you don't defend them, you just live by them. And anyone who can't meet you there falls away naturally. Loneliness isn't punishment here. It's space to rebuild your sense of worth without someone else validating it. Space to remember who you are when you're not chasing or fixing or proving. And soon, that loneliness turns into confidence. Not loud confidence, stable confidence. The kind that doesn't rush, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that knows red flags aren't obstacles, they're directions. At some point, you realize something uncomfortable. You don't actually miss them. You miss the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough. You miss the effort you gave, the hope you held on to, the belief that if you just loved harder, things would finally change. because chasing gave you purpose. It made your pain feel meaningful. It made waiting feel justified. It made disappointment feel like part of the process. Now that you've stopped, there's nothing left to fix. And that's when the grief shows up. You grieve the time you spent trying to earn what should have been given freely. You grieve the energy you poured into people who never poured back. You grieve the patience you mistook for love, not because you were foolish, but because you cared. And it hurts to admit that caring didn't save anything. You start seeing clearly how often you ignored your own voice, how many times your body told you to leave while your heart begged you to stay. You stayed loyal to people who weren't loyal to your peace, and that realization is heavy, because now you can't go back, you can't unsee the patterns, you can't pretend disrespect was accidental, you can't convince yourself that red flags were just misunderstandings. You've outgrown the version of you that survived on hope alone, and while that growth is necessary, it still feels like loss. But here's the truth: you didn't lose something real. You let go of something that only existed because you kept tolerating it. And the more distance you get, the clearer it becomes. What you were missing wasn't love, it was self-respect. Ignoring red flags was never about love. It was about not wanting to choose yourself, because choosing yourself meant walking away without guarantees, without reassurance, without someone else filling the silence. So you stayed. You told yourself love takes patience, that people need time, that your pain was just part of the process. But deep down, you knew the truth. You weren't staying because it felt right. You were staying because leaving felt terrifying. Terrifying to be alone. Terrifying to admit you deserved better. Terrifying to sit with the idea that you chose someone who couldn't choose you back, though you ignored the signs. Not because you didn't see them, but because seeing them meant action. And action meant accountability. But here's what finally clicks. Red flags don't hurt you. Ignoring them does. Every time you stayed, you taught yourself that your needs were optional. Every time you excused behavior, you taught yourself that love should be endured. Every time you waited for change, you delayed your own growth. And that cycle doesn't end when someone finally treats you right. It ends when you stop accepting what treats you wrong. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop wanting love. It means you stop betraying yourself just to keep it. It means you walk away sooner. You trust discomfort. You listen the first time something feels off. Not because you're cold, but because you're done confusing pain with connection. And once you reach this point, red flags don't feel complicated anymore. They feel clear. You don't argue with them. You don't negotiate with them. You don't try to turn them green. You leave because now you understand something you didn't before. Being alone is temporary, self-betrayal is cumulative, and you're no longer willing to pay that price. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect, and that's where the cycle finally ends. Being a teenager and going through this, it's different, because it's your first time feeling everything this deeply. The first time you stay up late just to talk to someone. The first time your mood depends on a notification. The first time you actually care if someone stays or leaves, and you don't even realize how much it's affecting you at the time. You just think, this is what it's supposed to feel like, so you give everything. Your time, your attention, your energy. Because to you at that age, you don't know how to control how much you feel. Nobody teaches you that. There's no balance, no take it slow. You just go all in without even realizing it. Because when something feels real for the first time, you don't question it. You don't think about protecting yourself. You don't think about what could go wrong. You don't think about whether the other person feels the same way. You just feel it. And you let it take over everything. Your whole day starts revolving around them. You wake up and check your phone first thing. You wait for their message like it actually means something. You reread conversations like there's something hidden in them. And the craziest part, you don't even notice how deep you're getting. It feels normal. It feels like this is just what liking someone is supposed to be. And when they give you attention, it hits different at that age. Because it's not just attention, it's validation. It's the feeling of being chosen, the feeling that out of everyone they're picking you to talk to laugh with, to spend time on. And when you haven't felt that before, it becomes everything. That's why you start giving more time, more energy, more of yourself. You stay up later than you should just to talk to them. You ignore other things just to keep the conversation going. You make space for them in your life without even realizing how much space you're giving. And in your head, you think it's mutual. You think they feel it the same way you do. Because why wouldn't they? They're replying. They're talking. They're there. So it must mean something, right? But that's the part nobody tells you when you're younger. Just because someone is there doesn't mean they're there the same way you are. And you don't realize that yet. Not until things start changing. And when things start changing, you don't accept it right away. You feel it. But you don't accept it, because at that age, your first instinct isn't to walk away, it's to hold on tighter. You start overthinking everything. Why did they reply slower? Why do they seem different? Did I do something wrong? And instead of pulling back, you lean in. You text more. You try harder to keep the conversation alive. You become more available, more understanding, more patient, because in your head, if something is slipping, you don't let go. You fix it. But what you don't realize is you're the only one trying to fix something. And that's where it starts to hurt. Not all at once, slowly. You start noticing the little things, the way they don't text like they used to, the way conversations feel shorter, the way you're the one carrying most of it now, and it's confusing, because just a little while ago, everything felt easy. So you keep chasing that version, the version of them that made you feel wanted, the version that stayed up late with you, the version that made it feel like you mattered. And every time they show a little bit of that again, it resets everything. You think, okay, it's back. You think maybe it was just a phase, maybe you were overthinking, maybe everything is fine, but it never stays. It comes back for a moment, then disappears again. And that's when you start feeling something you've never really felt before. Not just sadness, not just confusion, but the feeling of caring more than someone else. And when that hits you for the first time, at that age, it changes you. That feeling of caring more than someone else, it's something you don't understand the first time it happens. Because in your head, you're thinking, how can I care this much and they don't feel the same? It doesn't make sense. You replay everything, all the conversations, all the late nights, all the moments that felt real, and you start questioning all of it. You wonder if you imagined it, if you read too deep into things, if you made something bigger than it actually was. Because how does something feel that real and still end up one-sided? So you try to fix it, not directly, but in small ways. You change how you text, you try to be more interesting, you try to say the right things, you become more aware of everything you do, because now you're trying to hold on to something that's already slipping. And the worst part is, they don't even realize what you're going through. To them, it's just a shift, just a change in how they feel. But to you, it feels like everything is falling apart, because at that age, you don't separate your feelings from your identity. If someone pulls away, you don't just think they changed. You think, what's wrong with me? And that question stays in your head, quietly, in the background, every time they reply late, every time they seem distant, every time you feel like you're trying harder than they are. You start shrinking yourself without noticing, trying to fit into what you think they'll stay for, trying to be enough in a way that makes them come back. But no one tells you this when you're younger. You can't fix someone losing feelings by changing yourself, and that's the part you learn the hard way. That's when it really starts to change you. Not just how you feel about them, but how you start seeing yourself. Because once you feel like you're not enough for someone, that thought doesn't just stay in that situation. It follows you. You start second-guessing everything. The way you talk, the way you act, the way you show up. You think maybe you were too much, too available, too caring, too real. So you start holding back. Not because you want to, but because now you're scared of feeling that same way again. And the crazy part is, they probably don't even realize the impact they had. To them, it was just something that didn't work out, just a phase, just someone they talked to for a while. But to you, it was your first time feeling something real, your first time getting attached like that, your first time learning what it feels like to lose someone emotionally before you even fully had them. And that sticks with you, because now you know what it feels like to give everything and not get it back the same way. So the next time something like that comes around, you're not the same. You hesitate, you think more, you hold back parts of yourself you used to give freely. And that's when your teenage years start teaching you something nobody explains to you directly. Not everyone you feel something real with is meant to stay. After that, you start realizing something you didn't understand before. Not everyone feels things the same way you do. Because in your mind, if something feels real, it should mean something. It should last. It should turn into something more. But reality doesn't always work like that. Someone can talk to you every day, laugh with you, stay up late with you, make you feel like you matter, and still not feel it the same way you do. And that's confusing when you're younger, because you don't understand how something can feel so real and still not be real to them. So you start questioning everything, not just them, but the whole idea of what you felt. You think, was it even real? Did I just imagine it? Did I care more than I should have? But the truth is, it was real, just not equal. And that's a hard lesson to learn that early, because now you're not just dealing with feelings, you're dealing with imbalance. You start realizing you are the one initiating more, the one caring more, the one thinking about them more, the one building something in your head that they were just experiencing in the moment. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That's when things shift inside you. Not loudly, but quietly. You stop looking at it like something that ended and start seeing it for what it actually was. Something that meant more to you than it ever did to them. And once that realization settles in, you start changing in ways you don't even notice at first. You're not as quick to open up anymore. You don't say everything on your mind like you used to. You don't give your time as freely, because now you've seen what happens when you do. Not that you don't care anymore, it's that you care differently, more carefully, more guarded. Because before, you didn't think twice about it. If you liked someone, you showed it. If you cared, you gave it fully. No hesitation, no second guessing. But now, there's a pause, a moment where you think, is this even worth it? And that pause comes from experience, from that first time you gave everything and realized it didn't guarantee anything. So now you move smarter, you watch actions more, you notice effort more, you pay attention to how someone shows up, not just what they say. And even though it makes you more aware, there's a small part of you that misses how you used to be, the version of you that didn't overthink, the version that just felt things fully without fear, the version that believed if something felt real, that means something, because that version of you was pure, unfiltered, real in a way that's hard to get back once it changes. But that's what growing up during those years does to you. It doesn't just give you memories, it gives you awareness. And sometimes that awareness comes from learning things the hard way. After a while, you stop blaming them, and you stop blaming yourself. Because at that age, nobody really knows what they're doing, not fully. They don't know how to handle someone who cares deeply. They don't know how to communicate properly. They don't know how to leave without hurting someone. And you don't know how to protect yourself yet. So everything becomes intense. The good feels really good. The bad feels really bad. There's no balance, just highs and lows. And looking back, you start realizing something important. It wasn't meant to last. It was meant to teach you. It taught you what effort looks like, what inconsistency feels like, what it means to care more than someone else, and most importantly, it taught you what you should never accept again. Because once you've felt that imbalance, you recognize it faster next time. You don't stay as long. You don't ignore the signs as easily. Not because you don't care anymore, but because now you understand your value a little more than you did before. And that's the shift. You're not the same person you were at the start of it. You're more aware, more careful, more intentional. And even though it came from something that hurt, that growth, that stays. And when you look back on it later, you don't just remember the person. You remember the version of you that existed during that time. The version of you that felt everything without holding back. The version of you that stayed up late just to talk to someone. The version of you that gave your time, your energy, your attention without thinking twice about it. And yeah, that version of you got hurt, got confused, got left trying to understand something that didn't make sense. But that doesn't make it a mistake. It makes it real. Because those teenage years, they're not just about what happens. They're about what you learn from it. You learn that not everyone stays. You learn that feelings aren't always equal. You learn that just because something feels real doesn't mean it's meant to last. But you also learn something more important than all of that. You learn how deeply you can care, how real you can be, how much you're capable of giving when you're fully invested in someone. And that's not something to regret, that's something to take with you. Because one day, you'll meet someone who matches that energy, someone who doesn't make you question it, someone who doesn't make you feel like you're too much or not enough. And when that happens, everything you went through back then will finally make sense. Because those teenage years didn't break you, they built you into someone who knows the difference between something that feels real and something that actually is. I don't think I ever wanted too much. I didn't need perfection. I didn't need constant attention. I didn't need someone to save me. I just wanted to be cared for. I wanted someone who noticed when I went quiet, someone who checked in without being asked, someone who didn't treat my presence like something optional. But every time I tried to explain that, it sounded like neediness, like I was asking for too much. So I stayed quiet. I accepted less. I told myself I was independent enough to not need reassurance, but deep down that wasn't true. I wasn't asking to be obsessed over. I wasn't asking to be put on a pedestal. I was asking to matter, to feel like my absence would be noticed, like my feelings would be considered, like I didn't have to earn basic care by being easy, understanding, or low maintenance. And every time I didn't get that, I told myself it was fine. That this is just how people are, that expecting care is unrealistic, that I should be grateful for whatever effort showed up, but wanting to be cared for doesn't make you weak. It means you're human. It means you want a connection where effort is mutual and presence isn't forced. And the hardest part is realizing how long you stayed in places where you felt invisible just because you didn't want to seem like you needed too much. I didn't want someone to fix me. I just wanted someone who cared enough to stay aware of me. At some point, wanting to be cared for turns into accepting the bare minimum. You stop asking questions, stop expressing needs, stop pointing out what hurts. Because every time you do, it feels like you're asking for too much. So you adjust, you get excited over replies that should be normal, you appreciate effort that should be consistent, you thank people for things they do effortlessly if they truly cared, and you tell yourself this is just how love works. But deep down you feel it, the imbalance, the quiet disappointment, the way you're always the one paying attention. You're not asking for grand gestures, you're asking for awareness, to be checked on, to be considered, to feel like your emotions aren't an inconvenience, but instead you keep shrinking your expectations to fit what people are willing to give. You call it being low maintenance, being understanding, being independent, when really you're just afraid that if you ask for more, you'll lose what little you have. And that's the part that hurts, because you don't want more love, you just want the love that's already there to show up consistently. You don't want to beg for care, you want it to be natural. And the longer you settle, the more you start questioning yourself. Am I too sensitive? Am I needy? Am I wrong for wanting this? But wanting to be cared for was never the problem. Staying where you're barely noticed is. Pretending you don't need care slowly disconnects you from yourself. You start ignoring your own feelings before anyone else can. You tell yourself you're fine even when you're not. You swallow disappointment and call it maturity, because admitting you want care feels risky. It feels like giving someone power to decide whether you're too much, so you choose silence instead. You become the easy one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't ask for reassurance or consistency or emotional presence. And people like that version of you because it asks for nothing, but inside something starts to dull. You feel lonely even when you're not alone. You feel unseen even when someone's there. You start questioning whether your needs are even valid anymore. That's when you know you've gone too far. Not by wanting care, but by convincing yourself you don't deserve it. You weren't meant to love people from a distance. You weren't meant to be strong at the cost of being felt. Care isn't weakness. Wanting it isn't dependency. It's connection. And the moment you deny yourself that truth, you don't just lose it from others, you lose it from yourself. There's a moment where it finally hits you. You've been caring for everyone else while no one was really caring for you. You remember how often you checked in, how often you noticed shifts in tone, how often you adjusted yourself to make things easier for others, and then you look back and realize how rarely anyone did that for you. No one asked if you were okay when you went quiet. No one noticed when your energy changed. No one slowed down enough to really see you. And that realization hurts in a quiet, heavy way, because you weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking to be prioritized above everything. You were asking for reciprocity. To feel like your presence mattered as much as you made theirs matter. That's when the exhaustion sets in. Not physical tiredness, emotional fatigue. The kind that comes from always being the one who cares first, who understands more, who gives grace even when it costs you. You start wondering how you became so good at holding space for people who never learned how to hold it for you. And the truth is uncomfortable. You taught them it was okay to lean on you without leaning back, to receive care without returning it, not because you wanted imbalance, but because you didn't want to feel abandoned. And realizing that is both painful and clarifying, because it shows you something important. You weren't asking for too much, you were just asking it from the wrong people. That realization changes how you choose people. You stop being impressed by words. You stop getting attached to potential. You stop mistaking attention for care, because now you know the difference. Care looks like consistency. It looks like remembering. It looks like showing up even when it's not convenient. So you start paying attention to who checks in without being prompted, who notices when you're off, who doesn't make you explain why you need what you need. And at first that makes your circle smaller. You walk away from people you once would have stayed for. You stop overextending. You stop being the only one holding things together. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally care about yourself too. You don't chase care now. You don't hint at it. You don't downplay your needs to make someone comfortable. You let people show you how they show up. And if they don't, you don't argue with it. You don't try to teach them how to care. You accept the information and move accordingly, because wanting to be cared for isn't a flaw, it's a boundary. And the moment you start honoring it, you realize something important. You'd rather be alone than be surrounded and still feel unseen. Choosing yourself feels lonely at first, not because you made the wrong choice, but because you stopped filling the silence with people who never really saw you. You notice the absence quickly, the lack of constant conversation, the quiet that comes when you're no longer overgiving just to stay connected. And that quiet can be uncomfortable, because for a long time, being needed made you feel valued. Being available made you feel important. Being the one who cared most made you feel like you belonged. Now you don't do that anymore. You don't reach out first every time. You don't check in when it's never returned. You You don't hold space for people who won't hold it for you. And yes, that leaves gaps, but those gaps feel different than the loneliness you had before. Before you were lonely even when surrounded by people. Now you're alone but at peace. There's no resentment building, no quiet disappointment, no wondering why you're not enough. Just space to breathe, space to feel what you feel, space to rebuild a relationship with yourself that isn't based on neglect. You start realizing that loneliness with self-respect is lighter than connection without care. And once you taste that peace, it's hard to go back, because you finally understand being cared for starts with not abandoning yourself anymore. Learning how to receive care is harder than giving it. That part surprised me. I was always good at showing up, at checking in, at being thoughtful without being asked. But when someone tried to do that for me, I didn't know how to relax into it. I questioned it. I downplayed it. I felt uncomfortable being the one who was noticed, because for so long, care felt conditional, like something you earned by being useful, easy, understanding. So when someone offers it freely, without you proving anything, your first instinct is to brace yourself. You wait for it to disappear, you look for the catch, you assume it won't last, and that's not because you don't want care. It's because you're not used to it being consistent. You're used to being the giver, the supporter, the one who adapts. So receiving feels vulnerable in a way giving never did. It means letting someone see you without performing, letting yourself need without apologizing, letting care exist without questioning your worthiness of it. That takes unlearning. Takes time to believe that you don't have to exhaust yourself to deserve tenderness. And I'm still learning that, still reminding myself that care doesn't have to be chased, earned, or negotiated. Sometimes it's just there, and allowing it in is the bravest thing you can do after spending so long surviving without it. At some point, you stop asking why people don't care. You stop replaying conversations, stop analyzing tone, stop wondering what you could have done differently, because that question only keeps you stuck chasing explanations instead of truth. So you ask a different question: who actually shows up for me? Not who says they care, not who means well, not who shows interest when it's easy, but who checks in consistently, who notices when you're quiet, who doesn't disappear when you need space or reassurance or time. And the answer is usually smaller than you expect: fewer people, less noise, more clarity. That realization hurts, but it also simplifies everything. You stop pouring into people who only take. You stop investing in connections that leave you feeling unseen. You don't make announcements, you don't explain your shift, you just move differently. You protect your energy, you reserve your care for those who return it naturally, and slowly you stop feeling desperate to be noticed, because you're no longer surrounding yourself with people who make you feel invisible. Care stops being something you beg for and starts being something you recognize, and that's when you finally understand being cared for isn't about convincing people to treat you better. It's about choosing the ones who already do. Wanting to be cared for doesn't make you needy. It makes you honest. Needy is asking someone to fill a void they didn't create. Needy is expecting one person to carry everything for you. But wanting care, that's wanting reciprocity. That's wanting your effort to be met, your presence to be valued, your emotions to be considered. You're not asking someone to revolve their life around you. You're asking them to see you. And somewhere along the way, you were taught that asking for that was too much. So you minimized yourself. You softened your needs. You told yourself independence meant not needing anything from anyone. But that wasn't strength. That was self-denial, because even the strongest people need to feel cared for sometimes, need to feel noticed, need to feel like their existence matters to someone else. You don't want care because you can't survive without it. You want it because connection is part of being human. And the moment you stop shaming yourself for wanting that, everything changes. You stop apologizing for your needs. You stop pretending you're okay with being overlooked. You stop accepting crumbs just to feel included. You realize something important. You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong people. At the end of all this, I realized something simple. Wanting to be cared for is not something I negotiate anymore. I'm done explaining why it matters, done justifying why I feel hurt, done shrinking my needs so someone else can stay comfortable. Care is not a bonus, it's not extra, it's not something you earn by being quiet, easy, or low maintenance. It's the baseline. If someone doesn't notice me, doesn't check in, doesn't consider how their actions affect me, then they don't get access to me. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, out of self-respect. I spent too long convincing myself that wanting care made me weak, too long accepting half presence and calling it connection, too long staying where I felt invisible, just to avoid being alone. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need to be chased. I don't need to be obsessed over. I just need to be considered. And if someone can't do that naturally, without me begging, hinting, or explaining, then they're not my person. Because the right people won't make you feel guilty for wanting to matter. They won't make care feel conditional. They won't make you question whether you're asking for too much. They'll just show up. And until that happens, I'd rather stand alone with my needs intact than sit beside someone who makes me feel unseen. I didn't want too much. I just wanted to be cared for. And now I care enough about myself to never accept less again. I still remember the last message she ever sent me. Not because it was long, not because it explained everything, but because it didn't. It was simple, short, like it didn't carry the weight of everything that came before it, and that's what made it hit harder. Because how do you go from talking every day to one final message that feels like nothing? At first I kept rereading it, not because I didn't understand it, but because I felt like there had to be something more hidden in it, some deeper meaning, some explanation between the lines, something that would make it all make sense. But there wasn't. It said just enough to end things and not enough to explain them, and that's what messes with you, because your mind keeps trying to fill in the gaps that they left empty. I kept thinking back to everything before that message, all the conversations, all the moments that felt real, all the things she said that made it seem like we were building something. And then I'd look at that last message again, and it didn't match. It didn't feel like it came from the same person. Because how do you go from consistency to something that feels so detached, so final, without feeling final at all? The hardest part wasn't even what she said, it was what she didn't say. No real explanation, no real accountability, no real closure, just something that closed the door without ever fully acknowledging what was behind it. And that leaves you stuck in a weird place, because you're not just dealing with an ending, you're dealing with questions that never got answers. For a while I wanted to reply, not to argue, not to convince her to stay, just to understand, to ask the questions that were sitting in my head. What changed? When did it change? Was any of it real? But I didn't, because deep down I knew something. If she wanted me to understand, she would have explained it the first time. And that's a hard truth to accept, because it means the silence after that message was intentional, not confusion, not hesitation, a decision. She said what she wanted to say, and everything she didn't say was also part of that choice. After that, the conversation just stopped. No follow-ups, no checking in, no, how are you? Just silence. And silence hits different when you're used to hearing from someone every day. Because now it's not just quiet, it's absence. For a while I kept expecting another message, something more, something that would make it feel complete, but nothing came. And eventually, I had to accept something I didn't want to. That last message was really the last one. And over time, I stopped looking at it like something unfinished. I stopped expecting more, because sometimes closure doesn't come from another person. It comes from accepting what they already showed you. And what she showed me was enough, even if it wasn't explained. I still remember the last message she sent me, not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. It was the end. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. And now I understand something I didn't then. The way someone ends things tells you everything you need to know about how they saw it. So I stopped waiting for another message, stopped looking for more words, because the last one was already saying everything it needed to, just not in the way I wanted. There wasn't a big moment, no argument, no dramatic ending, no clear, this is over. That's what made it worse, because the moment I realized she stopped loving me was quiet. It was in the way she talked to me, the way her voice didn't carry the same feeling anymore, the way everything sounded the same but felt different, and that's when it hit me. Nothing happened, but everything changed. At first I tried to ignore it, because when something shifts like that, your first instinct isn't to accept it, it's to explain it. Maybe she's just tired, maybe she's stressed, maybe she just needs time. So I kept talking to her like nothing changed. Like if I stayed the same, things would go back to how they were, but they didn't. The conversations were still there, but the feeling wasn't. She still replied, still answered, still kept things going just enough, but something was missing. That energy, that warmth, that feeling like she actually wanted to be there, and you can feel that difference even if you don't want to admit it. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Shorter replies, less emotion, less effort to keep things alive, like I was someone she talked to, not someone she was connected to. And that's when it started sinking in, because love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you're the only one still holding on to what it used to be. And that realization hits in the smallest moments. A dry reply, a delayed answer, a conversation that used to flow that now feeling forced. I kept thinking it would come back, that maybe it was just a phase, that maybe I just needed to be more patient, so I stayed. I kept showing up the same way, hoping she'd meet me there again, but she didn't, and that's when it finally clicked. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet realization. I'm still here, but she's not. Not really. Not in the way she used to be. That's the hardest kind of ending. Because nothing officially ended, there's no clear moment to point at. Just a slow shift until you're standing in something that looks the same, but doesn't feel the same at all. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. You can try to ignore it, try to convince yourself it's temporary, but deep down, you know, something changed, and it's not coming back. The moment I realized she stopped loving me was the moment I stopped feeling loved by her. No words, no explanation, just a feeling that wasn't there anymore. And now I understand something clearly. Love doesn't just live in words, it lives in effort, in presence, in consistency. And when those disappear, the feeling follows. That was the moment, not loud, not obvious, just real. The worst kind of pain isn't being misunderstood. It's being seen and still getting left behind, because opening up isn't casual. You don't hand your real self to just anyone. You let them in on the stuff you normally keep locked up, the thoughts you argue with at 2 a.m., the fears you laugh off so nobody worries, the way you care so hard it almost feels embarrassing. And for a minute, it feels like you finally found someone safe. They read your silence correctly. They hear what you don't say. They look at you like they're not guessing, like they actually know. And that's the part that makes you soften. Then one day, they're gone. No fight. No goodbye that matches how close it felt. No ending that makes sense. Just nothing. And that nothing is loud. It sits where the connection used to be. It makes you replay everything like a crime scene. What did I do? Was I too much? Did I share too early? Should I have stayed guarded? But listen, if someone leaves after you showed them the real you, that doesn't mean you were wrong for being real. It doesn't mean your depth is a problem. It just means they weren't prepared for what they asked to see. Being open isn't the mistake. The mistake is thinking you should shrink so people won't run, because the right people don't disappear when they understand you. They get closer. After they leave, the silence doesn't feel feel empty. It feels heavy because now you're not just missing them, you're missing the version of yourself you were when you felt understood. You replay everything, not because you're obsessed, but because your brain is trying to make sense of something that never got an ending. You think about the way they listened, the way they noticed things nobody else did, the way you didn't have to explain yourself all the time, and now they're gone, so your mind starts filling in the gaps. You assume it must have been something you said, something you revealed too early, something you should have kept to yourself. That's how loss works when there's no closure. Your brain turns inward and starts pointing fingers. You don't just lose the person, you lose trust in your own judgment. You start telling yourself, yeah, next time don't say so much, next time don't get attached, next time stay surface level, and slowly, without realizing it, you begin shrinking, not because you want to, but because you're trying to protect yourself from feeling that again. But here's the part nobody tells you. What hurt wasn't opening up. What hurt was being met halfway and then abandoned. That doesn't mean vulnerability is dangerous. It means inconsistency is. And there's a difference. After something like that, trust doesn't disappear all at once. It just changes shape. You don't stop believing in people. You stop believing in consistency. You start noticing patterns everywhere, a slower reply, a shorter message, a shift in tone that probably means nothing, but your body reacts like it's everything. Because once you've been left after being seen, your nervous system remembers it before your mind does, so you stay alert, not dramatic, just cautious. You don't lean in the same way anymore, you hold back details, you soften your honesty, you keep parts of yourself for later, just in case later never comes. And the messed up part is, people don't always notice you doing this. They just feel a distance they can't explain. You still care. You're still present, but there's a layer of protection now, like glass between you and them, and you hate that because you remember how it felt before, how natural it was to let someone know you, how easy it felt to just exist without guarding every word. Now every connection feels like a risk assessment. Is this safe? Will they stay? Am I getting too close again? You don't ask these questions out loud, you just feel them, and slowly you start mistaking caution for growth. You tell yourself you're being mature, when really you're just afraid of reliving the same ending. But here's the truth. Trust didn't break because you opened up. It broke because someone showed you intimacy without responsibility, and that's not your fault. After being left like that, most people learn the wrong lesson. They think the problem was caring too much. They think the solution is to care less, so they start editing themselves. They become easier, quieter, less honest, less intense. They tell themselves, next time don't go so deep, next time don't show everything, next time stay in control. But all that really does is teach you how to survive connection, not how to experience it. You don't stop wanting closeness. You just start rationing it. You give people pieces instead of presence, versions instead of truth, highlights instead of depth, and then you wonder why connections feel empty now, why conversations don't hit the same, why nobody really knows you anymore, why being around people still feels lonely. It's because you didn't heal. You adapted, you learned how to avoid pain, not how to build something real again. And here's the hard truth. If someone can only stay when you're small, they were never meant to know you fully. Shrinking yourself doesn't protect you. It just delays the same outcome. Because the people who leave when you're honest would have left eventually anyway. All hiding does is make you lose yourself before they're even gone. At some point, you have to unlearn the lie that your depth is what pushed them away. Because if depth were the problem, it would hurt everyone the same. But it doesn't. Some people lean into it, others panic. And the difference has nothing to do with you. Depth only feels overwhelming to people who haven't met themselves yet. To someone who avoids their own emotions, your honesty feels like pressure, your awareness feels like exposure, your care feels like responsibility. So they leave. Not because you were too much, but because staying would have required them to show up in ways they weren't ready for. And that's important to understand. You weren't asking for perfection. You weren't asking for forever. You were just asking for presence, consistency, communication, effort that matched the closeness they accepted. That's not intensity, that's basic emotional accountability. But when someone isn't capable of that, They label it as too deep because it's easier than admitting they don't know how to stay. So no, your depth wasn't the problem. The problem was inviting someone into a space they didn't know how to hold. And that doesn't mean you should become lighter. It means you should become more selective. After something like this, a lot of people start punishing themselves without realizing it. They replay the moment over and over, looking for where they went wrong. They tell themselves, I should have seen it coming, I should have known better, I should have protected myself. But that's not growth, that's blame dressed up as reflection. You didn't fail by trusting, you didn't mess up by being open, you didn't lose because you cared, you just encountered someone who could only meet you halfway. And instead of letting that truth land, you turned it inward. You started questioning your instincts, your emotions, your ability to choose people. That's how one loss turns into self-doubt. You don't just grieve the person, you grieve your confidence in yourself, and slowly you start believing that maybe you're bad at choosing, that maybe your judgment can't be trusted. But here's what matters. You didn't misjudge their potential. You misjudge their capacity? Those are not the same thing. Someone can see you, feel close to you, even care about you, and still not be capable of staying. That doesn't mean your instincts are broken. It means you gave someone access before you saw their limits clearly. That's not something to punish yourself for. That's something to learn from without hardening, because the goal isn't to trust less, it's to trust wiser. Opening up again after something like that feels risky, not because you don't want connection to egg, but because you don't want to disappear inside it. You move slower this time, not closed, just intentional. You stop rushing closeness. You let consistency show itself before attachment does. You watch how someone handles honesty, not just how they respond to it, because being open doesn't mean being available to everyone. It means choosing who earns access. You learn that real safety isn't instant chemistry. It's follow-through. It's effort that doesn't fade when things get quiet. It's someone staying curious instead of pulling away. And you stop over-explaining yourself. You don't justify your needs. You don't apologize for caring. You don't chase clarity from people who disappear. Instead of communicate, that's not walls, that's boundaries. You realize you don't need to prove your depth anymore. The right people recognize it without being overwhelmed. And for the first time, opening up doesn't feel like self-abandonment. It feels like alignment. You're still honest, still real, still deep, just no longer handing your heart to people who haven't shown they can hold it. At the end of all this, you start to understand something important. The people who stay don't make you feel confused. They don't disappear when things get real. They don't make you guess where you stand. They don't make you question whether being yourself was a mistake. They stay because they see you, not in spite of it. They don't flinch at your depth. They don't rush you to be easier. They don't treat your honesty like a burden. They meet you with steadiness, not perfection. Not constant intensity, just consistency, and that's how you know. Because real connection doesn't feel like walking on glass. It doesn't make you anxious after silence. It doesn't leave you replaying everything you said. It feels calm, grounded, safe in a way that doesn't need explaining. You stop wondering if you're too much. You stop preparing yourself for disappearance. You stop shrinking to be kept. And you realize something quietly powerful. The people who left weren't proof that you were hard to love. They were proof that you were inviting people into a depth they hadn't earned yet. And that's not something to regret, because being seen was never a mistake. Being honest was never a flaw. Caring deeply was never the wrong move. The right people won't vanish once they understand you. They'll stay because of it. The worst kind of pain isn't being misunderstood. It's being seen and still getting left behind. Because opening up isn't casual. You don't hand your real self to just anyone. You let them in on the stuff you normally keep locked up, the thoughts you argue with at 2 a.m., the fears you laugh off so nobody worries, the way you care so hard it almost feels embarrassing, and And for a minute, it feels like you finally found someone safe. They read your silence correctly. They hear what you don't say. They look at you like they're not guessing, like they actually know. And that's the part that makes you soften. Then one day, they're gone. No fight, no goodbye that matches how close it felt. No ending that makes sense, just nothing. And that nothing is loud. It sits where the connection used to be. It makes you replay everything like a crime scene. What did I do? Was I too much? Did I share too early? Should I have stayed guarded? But listen, if someone leaves after you showed them the real you, that doesn't mean you were wrong for being real. It doesn't mean your depth is a problem. It just means they weren't prepared for what they asked to see. Being open isn't the mistake. The mistake is thinking you should shrink so people won't run. Because the right people don't disappear when they understand you. They get closer. After they leave, the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy because now you're not just missing them, you're missing the version of yourself you were when you felt understood. You replay everything, not because you're obsessed, but because your brain is trying to make sense of something that never got an ending. You think about the way they listened, the way they noticed things nobody else did, the way you didn't have to explain yourself all the time, and now they're gone. So your mind starts filling in the gaps. You assume it must have been something you said, something you revealed too early, something you should have kept to yourself. That's how loss works when there's no closure. Your brain turns inward and starts pointing fingers. You don't just lose the person, you lose trust in your own judgment. You start telling yourself, next time, don't say so much. Next time, don't get attached. Next time, stay surface level. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin shrinking. Not because you want to, but because you're trying to protect yourself from feeling that again. But here's the part nobody tells you. What hurt wasn't opening up. What hurt was being met halfway and then abandoned. That doesn't mean vulnerability is dangerous. It means inconsistency is. And there's a difference. After something like that, trust doesn't disappear all at once. It just changes shape. You don't stop believing in people. You stop believing in consistency. You start noticing patterns everywhere. A slower reply, a shorter message, a shift in tone that probably means nothing, but your body reacts like it's everything, because once you've been left after being seen, your nervous system remembers it before your mind does. So you stay alert, not dramatic, just cautious. You don't lean in the same way anymore. You hold back details. You soften your honesty. You keep parts of yourself for later, just in case later never comes. And the messed up part is, people don't always notice you doing this. They just feel a distance they can't explain. You still care. You're still present. But there's a layer of protection now, like glass between you and them. And you hate that because you remember how it felt before. How natural it was to let someone know you. How easy it felt to just exist without guarding every word. Now every connection feels like a risk assessment. Is this safe? Will they stay? Am I getting too close again? You don't ask these questions out loud. You just feel them. And slowly you start mistaking caution for growth. You tell yourself you're being mature, when really you're just afraid of reliving the same ending. But here's the truth. Trust didn't break because you opened up. It broke because someone showed you intimacy without responsibility, and that's not your fault. After being left like that, most people learn the wrong lesson. They think the problem was caring too much. They think the solution is to care less, so they start editing themselves. They become easier, quieter, less honest, less intense. They tell themselves, next time don't go so deep, next time don't show everything, next time stay in control. But all that really does is teach you how to survive connection, not how to experience it. You don't stop wanting closeness, you just start rationing it. You give people pieces instead of presence, versions instead of truth, highlights instead of depth. And then you wonder why connections feel empty now, why conversations don't hit the same, why nobody really knows you anymore. Why being around people still feels lonely? It's because you didn't heal, you adapt. You learned how to avoid pain, not how to build something real again. And here's the hard truth. If someone can only stay when you're small, they were never meant to know you. Shrinking yourself doesn't protect you, it just delays the same outcome. Because the people who leave when you're honest would have left eventually anyway. All hiding does is make you lose yourself before they're even gone. At some point, you have to unlearn the lie that your depth is what pushed them away. Because if depth were the problem, it would hurt everyone the same, but it doesn't. Some people lean into it, others panic, and the difference has nothing to do with you. Depth only feels overwhelming to people who haven't met themselves yet, to someone who avoids their own emotions. Your honesty feels like pressure, your awareness feels like exposure, your care feels like responsibility. So they leave, not because you were too much, but because staying would have required them to show up in ways they weren't ready for, and that's important to understand. You weren't asking for perfection, you weren't asking for forever. You were just asking for presence, consistency, communication, effort that matched the closeness they accepted. That's not intensity. That's basic emotional accountability. But when someone isn't capable of that, they label it as too deep because it's easier than admitting they don't know how to stay. So no, your depth wasn't the problem. The problem was inviting someone into a space they didn't know how to hold. And that doesn't mean you should become lighter. It means you should become more selective. After something like this, a lot of people start punishing themselves without realizing it. They replay the moment over and over, looking for where they went wrong. They tell themselves, I should have seen it coming. I should have known better. I should have protected myself. But that's not growth. That's blame dressed up as reflection. You didn't fail by trusting. You didn't mess up by being open. You didn't lose because you cared. You just encountered someone who could only meet you halfway. And instead of letting that truth land, you turned it inward. You started questioning your instincts, your emotions, your ability to choose people. That's how one loss turns into self-doubt. You don't just grieve the person, you grieve your confidence in yourself. And slowly you start believing that maybe you're bad at choosing, that maybe your judgment can't be trusted. But here's what matters. You didn't misjudge their potential. You misjudged their capacity. Those are not the same thing. Someone can see you, feel close to you, even care about you, and still not be capable of staying. That doesn't mean your instincts are broken. It means you gave someone access before you saw their limits clearly. That's not something to punish yourself for. That's something to learn from without hardening, because the goal isn't to trust less. It's to trust wiser. Opening up again after something like that feels risky. Not because you don't want connection, but because you don't want to disappear inside it, so you move slower this time, not closed, just intentional. You stop rushing closeness. You let consistency show itself before attachment does. You watch how someone handles honesty, not just how they respond to it, because being open doesn't mean being available to everyone. It means choosing who earns access. You learn that real safety isn't instant chemistry. It's follow through. It's effort that doesn't fade when things get quiet. It's someone staying curious instead of pulling away. And you stop over-explaining yourself. You don't justify your needs. You don't apologize for caring. You don't chase clarity from people who disappear. Instead of communicate. That's not walls, that's boundaries. You realize you don't need to prove your depth anymore. The right people recognize it without being overwhelmed, and for the first time, opening up doesn't feel like self-abandonment. It feels like alignment. You're still honest, still real, still deep, just no longer handing your heart to people who haven't shown they can hold it. At the end of all this, you start to understand something important. The people who stay don't make you feel confused. They don't disappear when things get real. They don't make you guess where you stand. They don't make you question whether being yourself was a mistake. They stay because they see you, not in spite of it. They don't flinch at your depth. They don't rush you to be easier. They don't treat your honesty like a burden. They meet you with steadiness, not perfection, not constant intensity, just consistency, and that's how you know. because real connection doesn't feel like walking on glass. It doesn't make you anxious after silence. It doesn't leave you replaying everything you said. It feels calm, grounded, safe in a way that doesn't need explaining. You stop wondering if you're too much. You stop preparing yourself for disappearance. You stop shrinking to be kept, and you realize something quietly powerful. The people who left weren't proof that you were hard to love. They were proof that you were inviting people into a depth they hadn't earned yet. And that's not something to regret, because being seen was never a mistake. Being honest was never a flaw. Caring deeply was never the wrong move. The right people won't vanish once they understand you. They'll stay because of it. Sometimes the question isn't, will I find love? It's deeper than that. It's, will someone ever choose me the way I choose them? Not temporarily, not when it's convenient, not when they're bored, but fully. There's a difference between being liked and being chosen. Liked is easy, chosen is intentional. And if you've been the one who always gives more, who stays longer, who loves harder, you start wondering if maybe you're meant to be the giver but never the one kept. You watch other people get picked without hesitation, publicly, proudly, confidently, and you sit there thinking, what is it about me that makes people unsure? Is it timing? Is it me? Am I too much? Not enough? And the scariest part isn't being alone. It's the thought that maybe you'll always be almost chosen. Being the almost changes you. You're not rejected loudly. You're not cut off dramatically. You're just not picked. You're the one they talk to every day until they meet someone else. The one they say they really like but never commit to. The one who's good enough to keep around, just not good enough to claim. And that messes with your head because there's no clear reason. They don't say you're lacking. They don't say you're the problem, they just hesitate, and hesitation feels personal. You start replaying everything. Was I too available, too understanding, too patient, or maybe not exciting enough, not mysterious enough, not whatever it takes to be chosen instantly? And slowly, your self-worth gets tied to someone else's indecision. That's the dangerous part, because being the almost doesn't feel like rejection. It feels like you were close enough to hope, close enough to imagine it, close enough to get attached, but not close enough to stay. And when that keeps happening, you don't just question love, you question yourself. After being almost chosen enough times, you start adjusting yourself, not dramatically, not obviously, just subtly. You become a little less expressive, a little less attached, a little less honest about how much you care. Because maybe that's the problem. Maybe you're too available, too deep, too ready. So you try being cooler, more detached, more mysterious. You pretend you don't need reassurance. You act like you're fine with seeing where it goes. You downplay your feelings so you don't scare anyone off. But here's the truth. Shrinking yourself doesn't make you more lovable. It just makes you less visible. And the worst part? Even when you adjust, even when you play it safe, you still end up almost chosen, because the issue was never that you were too much, it's that you were giving depth to people who weren't ready for it. And instead of realizing that, you internalized their hesitation. You made it about your value. You thought, if I just change this one thing, maybe next time they'll stay. But love isn't unlocked by becoming smaller. It's aligned by being fully yourself and meeting someone who doesn't hesitate. And the sooner you stop reshaping yourself for someone's indecision, the sooner you realize you were never lacking. You were just misaligned. After a while, you stop expecting to be chosen, not because you don't want it, but because you're tired of getting your hopes up. So now, whenever something starts to feel good, you brace yourself. You tell yourself not to get excited, not to imagine too far ahead, not to believe it too much, because history has taught you how this usually ends. You assume they'll lose interest, assume they'll find someone better, assume you'll become the almost again. And that mindset is heavy, because you're not just protecting yourself, you're preparing for rejection before it even happens. You start reading into small changes, shorter text, longer replies, different energy. And instead of feeling secure, you feel on edge, not because they've done something wrong, but because you've been here before. You've felt the slow fade. You've watched interest turn into distance. You've experienced the shift from excitement to uncertainty. So now you expect it, and expecting rejection changes how you show up. You hold back. You don't fully invest. You act like you care less than you do. Because if it falls apart again, at least you can say you weren't all in. But deep down, you don't want to live like that. You don't want to approach love like it's already ending. You just want one time where it doesn't. There's a difference between being unwanted and being unmatched. And if you've been the almost too many times, you start confusing the two. Unwanted feels personal, like there's something wrong with you, like you're missing some quality everyone else seems to have. Unmatched is different. Unmatched means the timing was off, the emotional depth wasn't equal, the intentions weren't aligned. Unmatched isn't about your worth, it's about compatibility. But when someone hesitates to choose you, it doesn't feel like misalignment, it feels like rejection. And rejection feels final. You forget that love isn't a competition, that being chosen isn't about being better, it's about being right for each other at the same time. You can be attractive, kind, emotionally available, and still not be someone's person. That doesn't reduce you. It just means alignment wasn't there. And the moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "Were we actually aligned?" everything shifts, because maybe you weren't almost chosen. Maybe you were just never meant to settle for someone unsure. Here's something you don't realize at first. Your fear of not being chosen might actually be protecting you, because when you're scared of being the almost again, you start paying attention. You notice inconsistency faster. You recognize mixed signals sooner. You don't ignore hesitation like you used to. Before, you'd cling to potential. You'd fill in gaps with hope. You'd convince yourself that uncertainty just needed time. Now, you watch. You see when someone's energy shifts. You see when effort isn't equal. You see when you're the only one leaning in. And instead of begging to be chosen, you pull back. Not out of ego, not out of pride, but out of self-respect, because deep down you don't want to be chosen by someone who's unsure. You don't want to be picked after being compared, after being doubted, after being an option. You want someone certain. So maybe the real shift isn't asking, "Will I ever be chosen?" It's asking, do I even want to be chosen by someone who hesitates? And that question changes everything. At some point you get tired of chasing certainty from other people. You get tired of waiting for someone to confirm your value, tired of reading into words, tired of hoping their actions will finally match. So something shifts. Instead of asking, do they want me? You start asking, do I even want this? That's power. Because when you become certain in yourself, you stop needing constant reassurance. You know what you bring, you know how you love, you know the depth you offer. And that confidence changes your energy. You don't beg, you don't overprove, you don't shrink to stay, you let people show up or not. And if they hesitate, you don't internalize it. You understand that someone else's confusion is not a reflection of your worth. You stop trying to convince people to choose you, because the right person won't need convincing. They'll recognize you, and more importantly, you'll recognize them. Not because they picked you, but because they're clear, consistent, and certain. And this time, certainty goes both ways. Here's the part nobody tells you. Being chosen starts with choosing yourself first, not in a cliche way, not in a "I don't need anyone" way, but in a real way. It's choosing not to stay where you feel unsure, choosing not to compete for attention, choosing not to lower your standards just to secure a spot in someone's life. Because when you don't choose yourself, you'll accept being almost chosen. You'll accept being an option, maybe placeholder. But when you decide you're not negotiable, everything shifts. You stop trying to earn love. You stop proving your worth. You stop overextending just to feel wanted. You realize something important. If someone has to debate whether you're enough, they're not your person. Choosing yourself means walking away even when you like them, even when there's potential, even when part of you hopes they'll change, because you don't want reluctant love. You want certainty. And the moment you become certain that you deserve that, you stop fearing the question, will Will I ever be chosen because you already are, by yourself? Love feels different when you don't need it to validate you. Before, being chosen felt like proof that you were enough, proof that you were desirable, proof that you mattered. So when someone hesitated, it shook you because it felt like they were confirming your worst fear. Now, love isn't proof anymore, it's a bonus. You don't look at someone's commitment as a measurement of your worth. You don't panic when someone pulls away. You don't chase reassurance like you used to, because your value isn't waiting on someone else's decision, and that changes everything. You approach love calmly. You enjoy it without clinging to it. You let it build instead of forcing it. You don't need someone to choose you to feel complete. You want to be chosen, yes, but you don't need it to feel worthy. And that shift is powerful, because when love is no longer validation, you stop settling for almost. You stop trying to convince someone. You stop auditioning for a role in their life. You let them decide. And if they hesitate, you don't break, you move on. So, will I ever be chosen? Yeah, but not in the way I used to think. I used to believe being chosen meant someone finally seeing my value, finally realizing what I bring, finally deciding I was enough. But I see it differently now. The right person won't discover my worth. They'll recognize it immediately. There won't be hesitation, no comparing, no, I'm not sure what I want. It'll be clear, because when someone is aligned with you, choosing you isn't a debate, it's natural. And here's the real answer to the question: I will be chosen when I stop entertaining people who are unsure. I will be chosen when I don't accept almost, when I don't beg for clarity, when I walk away from hesitation. Because being chosen isn't about being better than someone else. It's about being right for someone who's right for you. And until that happens, I'm not behind, I'm not lacking, I'm not unlovable, I'm just not settling. So yeah, I'll be chosen. Not by someone confused, not by someone temporary, not by someone half in, but by someone certain. And this time I'll be just as certain back. Sometimes I don't question whether I love people. I know I do. I love intentionally, I love in details, I love in the quiet ways that don't always get noticed. I remember the small things you said 3 months ago. I notice when your voice sounds slightly different. I pay attention to your moods without you having to explain them. If you're overwhelmed, I adjust. If you're distant, I check in. If you're hurting, I feel it too. So when I sit alone and that thought creeps in, am I actually loved the same way? It doesn't come from insecurity. It comes from imbalance, because loving someone isn't hard for me, but feeling consistently loved back, that's where it gets complicated. There's a difference between being wanted and being valued, between being chosen and being considered, between someone enjoying your presence and someone protecting your heart. And sometimes I can't tell which one I am. Am I loved, or am I just convenient? Am I loved, or am I just consistent? Am I loved, or am I just the safe option, the stable one, the reliable one, the one who won't leave easily? Because people say I love you all the time, but love isn't proven in the words, it's proven in patterns. Do you show up the same way on random days, not just when you're lonely? Do you care about my emotions when they're inconvenient? Do you notice when I go quiet, or do you only feel my absence when I stop giving? That's the part nobody talks about. You can be in a relationship, you can be talking every day, you can be physically close and still feel emotionally unsure, still feel like you're giving more than you're receiving, still feel like if you stop trying so hard, everything would fall apart. And if that's true, is that love? Or is that maintenance? I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need over-the-top affection. I don't need dramatic gestures. But I need to feel secure. I need to feel like I matter when I'm not performing strength. I need to feel like I'm loved even on the days I'm quiet, tired, distant, not at my best. Because real love doesn't just enjoy you when you're easy. It stays steady when you're human. And I think that's what scares me, the possibility that I'm loved for what I provide, not for who I am, loved for my stability, loved for my patience, loved for my understanding, but not deeply studied, not emotionally prioritized, not carefully handled. And if I'm being honest, I don't want half love. I don't want to be someone's comfort without being their commitment. I don't want to be someone's peace without being their priority. So yeah, sometimes I sit with that quiet question. Am I actually loved, or am I just really good at loving others? The hardest part about questioning love is that it doesn't always come from obvious neglect, doesn't always come from cheating or lying or someone clearly mistreating you. Sometimes it comes from subtle absence, from emotional gaps you can't quite explain, from feeling like you're standing next to someone but not fully with them. Because love isn't just about presence, it's about engagement. It's about whether someone studies you the way you study them. I ask myself things like, if I stopped initiating, how long would it take for them to notice? If I didn't send the good morning text, would they send one first? If I went quiet for a few days, would they check in because they care or because they're bored? And I hate that those thoughts even exist, because when love feels secure, you don't test it in your head, you don't calculate effort, you don't keep mental score, you just exist inside it peacefully. But when love feels uneven, your brain starts tracking patterns. Who apologizes first? Who makes more time? Who adjusts more? And that's when the doubt begins. Not loud doubt, quiet doubt. The kind that sits in your chest at night. The kind that makes you reread conversations. The kind that makes you wonder if you're asking for too much or just asking the wrong person. I don't want dramatic love. I don't want obsession. I don't want someone who can't function without me. I want someone who chooses me consciously, daily, not because I'm easy, not because I'm stable, not because I don't cause problems, but because they genuinely value me, because they care about my internal world, because they don't want to risk losing me through laziness or emotional distance. That's the difference. You can love someone and still be careless. You can love someone and still take them for granted. You can love someone and still assume they'll never leave. But being loved properly, that feels intentional. It feels protected. It feels like someone is actively maintaining the connection, not just enjoying it. And sometimes I wonder, if I pulled my energy back to neutral, if I stopped overcompensating, if I loved at the same level I was receiving, would it still feel strong? Or would everything start crumbling? Because if my effort is what's holding us up, that's not love, that's imbalance disguised as loyalty, and I don't want to resent someone for something I never addressed, but I also don't want to keep shrinking just to avoid conflict. I want to feel wanted loudly enough that I don't question it silently. I want to feel secure enough that I don't rehearse conversations in my head. I want to feel chosen in a way that removes doubt instead of feeding it, because love shouldn't feel like something you constantly measure. It should feel like something you rest inside, and until I can sit in it, without wondering if I matter the same way, I think that question will always echo softly. Am I actually loved, or am I just deeply loving? I think what makes this question heavy is that I don't doubt your feelings. I doubt your effort, because feelings are invisible. Effort isn't. You can tell me you love me, you can say it in the right tone, you can even mean it. But love that isn't maintained eventually feels like memory, and I don't want to live off potential. I don't want to survive off they care, they're just bad at showing it. Because if I can show it, if I can adjust, if I can communicate clearly, why does it feel like I'm the one stretching more? That's where the exhaustion comes in. Not from loving you, from overcompensating for the space you leave. There's a specific loneliness that comes when you're the emotionally aware one, when you're the one who brings things up calmly, when you're the one who says, let's talk about it, when you're the one who makes sure small issues don't become big ones. And sometimes I wonder, if I stopped being that person, would you step into that role? Or would we slowly drift because I stopped carrying the emotional weight? That's not partnership, that's imbalance. And imbalance slowly turns love into doubt. I don't need perfection. I need reciprocity. I need to feel like if I fall apart, you won't just watch. I need to feel like if I go quiet, you'll notice. I need to feel like if I stop being strong for a moment, you won't become distant. Because love isn't just about who stays when it's easy. It's about who leans in when things feel uncomfortable. And sometimes I don't feel leaned into, I feel leaned on. And there's a difference. I don't want to be your emotional safety net without you being mine. I don't want to be the consistent one while wondering if I'm consistently valued. And maybe you do love me, but if I constantly have to question it, then something about the way it's being expressed isn't landing. Because real love doesn't eliminate all fear, but it does eliminate constant uncertainty. It doesn't make you feel like you're negotiating your worth. It makes you feel secure enough to stop asking yourself if you matter. And until I can sit in this without quietly measuring effort, without wondering if I'm too much, without shrinking my needs to maintain peace, that question will stay in the back of my mind. Am I actually loved, or am I just deeply convenient? I think the real fear isn't that you don't love me, it's that you love me comfortably. There's a difference. Comfortable love is quiet. It assumes. It relaxes a little too much. It stops trying as hard because it believes I'm not going anywhere. And maybe I won't, but that doesn't mean I don't notice the shift. In the beginning, effort feels automatic. You call just to hear my voice. You ask questions and actually wait for the answers. You care about how my day went, not just what happened. But once things feel stable, do you still pursue me? Do you still choose me loudly? Do you still protect the connection like it could be lost? Or do you just exist in it? Because love that stops being intentional slowly starts feeling optional. And I don't want to feel optional in someone's life. I don't want to be the person you assume will always understand, the person you assume won't leave, the person you assume doesn't need reassurance, because the strong ones still need softness, the independent ones still need consistency, the calm ones still need effort, and sometimes I think people forget that. They mistake my patience for infinite tolerance. They mistake my understanding for emotional immunity. They mistake my loyalty for permanence. But even loyal people get tired. Even understanding people feel hurt. Even calm people question things when the effort changes. I don't want to be loved lazily. I don't want to be loved based on convenience. I want to be loved actively. I want someone who doesn't just assume I know they care, but make sure I feel it. Someone who doesn't just stay, but stays with intention. Because here's the truth, if I ever stopped trying the way I do now, would you fight for this the same way? If I ever pulled my energy back to neutral, would you step up or would you get distant? That question alone tells me a lot. Love shouldn't feel like something I'm maintaining by myself. It shouldn't feel like if I relax for a second, everything will slowly fade. It should feel mutual, balanced, protected from both sides. And until I feel that consistently, not just in moments, not just after conflict, not just when I express doubt, that quiet thought will linger. Am I loved deeply or just comfortably? Maybe the hardest part about all of this is that I don't want to accuse you. I don't want to sound ungrateful. I don't want to seem insecure. I don't want to turn something small into something heavy. But silence builds pressure, and pressure turns into quiet resentment, because when I feel like I'm giving more than I'm receiving, I don't explode, I adjust. I overthink, I analyze, I start loving more carefully, and that's when something shifts inside me. I stop being soft in the same way. I stop opening up as freely. I stop expressing needs because I don't want to feel like a burden. And you probably wouldn't even notice at first, because I don't change loudly, I change subtly. And that's the scary part, because once I start protecting myself emotionally, I don't fully come back the same. I don't want to have to guard my heart with someone who says they love me. I don't want to measure my words. I don't want to calculate how much reassurance I can ask for without seeming too much. I want to exist freely, but freedom only comes when love feels secure, not intense, not obsessive, secure. The kind of secure where I don't have to question your effort after a disagreement. The kind of secure where your consistency doesn't depend on my mood. The kind of secure where I don't feel like I have to earn softness from you, because love shouldn't feel conditional. It shouldn't spike when I'm easy to love and dip when I need extra understanding. And sometimes I ask myself something deeper. If I disappeared tomorrow, would you miss me because you love me? Or because you lost something that benefited you? Would you miss my heart? Or just my stability? Would you miss the way I cared, or just the fact that I cared consistently? That difference matters more than people realize, because I don't want to be someone's comfort zone if I'm not also their conscious choice. I don't want to be someone's safe option if I'm not also their priority. And I don't want to keep pouring into something where I feel like I'm the emotional backbone. Love should feel like two people holding it up, not one person carrying it quietly. And until I feel that weight shared, I'll keep asking myself softly, am I actually loved, or am I just deeply dependable? I think what I've realized is this: if I constantly have to ask myself whether I'm loved, then something inside me doesn't feel safe, because real love doesn't require constant decoding. It doesn't make you sit alone at night replaying conversations. It doesn't make you question your worth after small disagreements. It doesn't make you shrink just to maintain peace. Real love feels steady, not perfect, not dramatic, steady. It feels like someone who chooses you, even when you're not at your best. It feels like someone who reassures without being forced. It feels like someone who protects your heart, like it's their responsibility too. And maybe you do love me, but if your love makes me anxious, if it makes me overanalyze, if it makes me feel like I'm asking for too much when I ask for consistency, then it's not landing the way love should, because love shouldn't make you question your value. It should reinforce it. It shouldn't make you feel like you're lucky to be chosen. It should make you feel mutually chosen. Maybe the real shift isn't asking, am I actually loved? Maybe it's asking, do I feel secure here? Do I feel prioritized? Do I feel emotionally safe? Because love isn't just something someone says. It's something you experience repeatedly. It's in the tone, the effort, the consistency after comfort sets in, the way someone handles you when you're difficult, not just when you're easy. And if I'm honest, I don't want intense love. I don't want dramatic love. I don't want love that feels like a roller coaster. I want love that makes me stop asking this question entirely. Love that's so clear, so intentional, so consistent that doubt doesn't have room to grow. Because if I'm constantly wondering whether I'm loved, then maybe I'm not asking for too much. Maybe I just haven't experienced love that makes the answer obvious. And when I do, I won't have to ask, I'll know. Some nights, I stay up hugging my pillow pretending it's someone. Not because I'm dramatic, but because it gets lonely when no one chooses you. You start wondering if love just missed you. If maybe everyone else got picked and you were the one who got skipped over. I tell myself I'm fine being alone, and most days I am. But late at night when the world is quiet, that's when the question comes back. Will love ever find me? Or am I just meant to imagine it? I think the hardest part is not the loneliness. It's feeling like you have so much love to give and nowhere to put it. No hands to hold. No one to come home to. Just you, your thoughts, and the same hope you keep tucking away every morning. And what scares me most is not being alone right now. It's the thought that maybe this is permanent. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen does. It's watching people find each other while you keep ending up by yourself. It's being told, your time will come so many times that it starts to feel like a placeholder sentence. You start questioning yourself. Am I too quiet? Too much? Not enough? You replay everything, trying to find the reason no one stayed. And late at night, when you're hugging a pillow, imagining it's someone who wants you back, those thoughts get louder. Not because you don't love yourself, but because you're tired of being the only one who does. The scary part is how slowly it affects your worth. You don't stop believing in love, you stop believing it wants you, and that's when loneliness becomes heavier than silence, because now it's not just about being alone, it's about wondering if something is wrong with you for being alone this long. This feeling doesn't mean you're unlovable, even though it really feels like it. It means you've been alone long enough for the silence to start telling stories. And silence is loud when it goes on too long. You start mistaking timing for rejection. You start turning waiting into a flaw. You start thinking love hasn't found you because you're missing something. But love doesn't work on fairness, and it doesn't run on schedules. Some people find it early. Some people find it after they've learned how to sit with themselves at night. And that doesn't make you behind. It makes you human. The fact that you still want love, still imagine it, still hope for it, even after feeling unchosen, that's not weakness. That's proof your heart didn't close. Imagining love at night doesn't make you desperate. It means you're human. You're not hugging a pillow because you're weak. You're doing it because your body remembers what closeness feels like, even when your life hasn't caught up yet. There's nothing wrong with wanting someone to come home to, with wishing there was a hand to reach for when the day finally goes quiet. The problem isn't that you imagine love, it's that you've been alone long enough to start believing wanting it is something you need to outgrow. But love isn't something you mature out of, something you wait for without turning against yourself in the meantime. You don't need to shame the part of you that still hopes at night. That part is just proof you haven't gone numb, and as long as you haven't gone numb, love hasn't missed you. Loneliness at night doesn't get to decide your future. Even when it feels endless, nights are heavy because they strip everything down. No distractions, no noise, just you and the question you try not to ask during the day. But night feelings aren't prophecies. They're just unmet needs speaking when everything else is quiet. Being alone right now doesn't mean you'll always be alone, and being unchosen so far doesn't mean you're unchoosable. It just means you haven't been met yet. There's a difference. You're not behind, you're not forgotten, you're not running out of time. You're just in the part of the story where love hasn't arrived, not the part where it never does. The hardest balance is holding hope without turning it into self-doubt, because when you hope for something for a long time, it can start to feel personal when it hasn't arrived yet. You tell yourself you're patient, but underneath that, there's a quiet fear that maybe hope is just another way of setting yourself up, so you try to numb it. You tell yourself you don't need love, you act like you're fine on your own, but hope doesn't disappear that way. It just goes quiet and waits for the night. The truth is, hope isn't the problem. Hope only hurts when you turn it inward and use it as proof that something is wrong with you. You're allowed to hope without questioning your worth. You're allowed to want love without it meaning you're lacking. Hope isn't weakness. It's just your heart still believing in a future you haven't reached yet. When love hasn't found you yet, it can make you feel invisible. You're moving through life unnoticed, unchosen, easy to pass by. But invisibility isn't the truth. It's just what loneliness whispers when it's tired of waiting. You don't get overlooked because you lack something. You get overlooked because connection isn't something you can force into timing. The right person doesn't miss you because they're better at noticing. They find you because they're looking for what you already are. And until then, you're not invisible. You're just living in the space before recognition. That space feels quiet. It feels long. It feels unfair. But it isn't empty. It's shaping you into someone who will recognize real love when it finally arrives. Not because you're desperate for it, but because you're ready to receive it without disappearing into it. Love usually doesn't find you when you're proving you deserve it. It finds you when you stop performing and start existing. For a long time, I thought if I was good enough, patient enough, understanding enough, someone would finally see me. So I overgave, overthought, over-explained. But love doesn't arrive as a reward for endurance. It arrives when you're no longer shrinking to be easier to choose. The moment you stop asking, what do I need to fix? And start asking, what do I need to feel safe? Something shifts. You don't chase connection anymore, you allow it, and that doesn't make love come faster, and it makes it come healthier. Because the love that finds you then isn't choosing you because you tried hard enough. It's choosing you because you're finally standing still as yourself. Waiting is hard because it's empty time. Not empty in life, but empty in connection. You're still living, still growing, still doing everything you're supposed to do, but there's no one to share the quiet with, and that's where loneliness sneaks in. The difference between waiting and loneliness is what you tell yourself while you're there. Loneliness says, nothing is happening because I'm not enough. Waiting says, something hasn't arrived yet, and that's not a reflection of my worth. Learning to sit in the waiting doesn't mean pretending you don't want love. It means refusing to let the absence of it turn into self-blame. You can want love deeply and still treat yourself gently in the meantime. You can feel the quiet without letting it convince you that this is all there will ever be, because waiting isn't where your story ends. It's just the space between who you've been and who you're about to meet. There's a moment when hope stops hurting, not because love arrived, but because you stop fighting yourself while waiting. You stop asking the question every night with fear in it. You still want love, you still imagine it, but it no longer feels like your life is on hold without it. Hope becomes something gentle, something you carry identity, not something that weighs you down. You realize love finding you was never about being chosen faster or proving you're worthy enough. It was about becoming someone who doesn't disappear while waiting to be seen. And when that shift happens, loneliness loosens its grip, not because you're no longer alone, but because you're no longer against yourself. That's when hope becomes safe again, and that's usually right before love finally knows where to find you. Some nights you still wish someone was there, and that doesn't mean the healing didn't work. It just means you're human. Missing connection isn't a setback. It's not proof you're regressing or going backward. It's just your heart remembering what it wants to share. The difference now is that the wanting doesn't hurt the same. It doesn't spiral. It doesn't turn into panic. It doesn't make you question your worth. It just exists. You can want love without feeling empty without it. You can imagine closeness without feeling broken when it's not there yet. And that's growth. Because you're no longer waiting with desperation. You're waiting with trust. Trust that love doesn't miss people who are becoming more themselves. It finds them when they're steady enough to receive it without disappearing. The love that finds you after this season feels different, not louder, not dramatic, safer. It doesn't make you question yourself. It doesn't make you wonder where you stand. It doesn't ask you to stay up at night holding space for uncertainty. It meets you where you are. And because you've spent time alone, because you've learned how to sit with yourself, you don't cling to it, you appreciate it, you don't lose yourself in it because you know what it feels like to hold yourself first. That's why this waiting was never a punishment, it was preparation, not to make you stronger in a hard way, but steadier in a soft one. So if you're still alone right now, still asking if love will ever find you, it will. And when it does, you'll understand why it couldn't find you earlier. You weren't meant to be met when you were questioning your worth. You were meant to be met when you finally believed you were already enough. If you're asking that question right now, it doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're honest. You're honest about wanting connection, about feeling alone sometimes, about hoping there's more than just nights where you hug a pillow and imagine what could be. And that honesty matters. Love doesn't find people who gave up on it. It finds people who stayed open even when it hurt. People who learned how to be alone without becoming bitter, who waited without turning against themselves. So no, love didn't miss you. It just hasn't arrived yet. And when it does, it won't feel like something you chased or finally earned. It'll feel like something that recognizes you, like it knew where you were the whole time, and suddenly those nights won't feel so heavy anymore. Not because you forgot them, but because they led you right where you were meant to be. One day you won't ask the question anymore, not because love arrived overnight, but because you stopped measuring your life by what's missing. You'll still want connection, you'll still imagine it sometimes, but it won't feel heavy. You'll realize you didn't waste these nights. You were learning how to stay gentle in a quiet season, and that matters because the love that eventually finds you won't have to convince you that you're worth choosing. You'll already know. And when someone finally holds you, it won't feel like something you waited forever for. It'll feel like something that arrived right when you were ready to be seen, not as someone hoping to be chosen, but as someone whole,